I just know green dot on.
Yeah.
Is it on?
To the
Started getting emails today.
Yeah.
battery.
I'm fine.
Okay. Here we go.
6 o'clock.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order this special board meeting of the Perrysburg Board of Education on Thursday, December 12th, 2024. Mr. Drew, your roll call, please.
Ms. Roland Miller,
Here.
Ms. Larimer,
Here.
Dr. Reffert,
Here.
Ms. Minke, Mr. Bennington.
Here. We'll start with standing with the pledge for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as we have some guests tonight, I will do a safety briefing. Perrysburg Schools welcomes you to the Commodore Building, and we thank you for attending tonight's Board of Education meeting. We care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests. Please note that there are exits on both the east and west sides of the cafeteria. In case of an emergency, an AED is located just outside the cafeteria doors. You are located at 140 East Indiana Avenue. Thank you for joining us tonight and supporting Perrysburg Schools. So we have a proposed agenda in front of us tonight for this special meeting. You can see even from how the tables are set up, we're going to be doing this a little bit differently than how we've done regular meetings. I did also want to point out, because some people have asked, and we do have some guests here tonight. Tonight, as is the case with special meetings, there is not an agenda item for public participation. I look at this meeting as kind of part one of a two-part meeting, that second part being at our regular meeting Monday, where there will be two opportunities for public participation in that meeting. So look forward to this discussion tonight, as much as one can look forward to a discussion like this, and then engaging with and hearing feedback, both in the next regular meeting as well as future meetings. Also going to ask for an executive session towards the end of the meeting. So with that context, can I have a motion to adopt the proposed agenda?
So moved.
Ms. Larimer?
Second.
Ms. Roland Miller? Roll call?
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Ms. Roland Miller,
Yes.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Ms. Minke,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes, the agenda is adopted. So this board at its last meeting, and as you know, we know that the administration has been working on the budget reduction plan in light of the outcome of the November levy campaign. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hostler, Mr. Drew, to hear about the work that the administrative team has been doing.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate all of you being here this evening, and certainly thanks to the administrators that we'll be hearing from as well this evening. We wanted to have this meeting to kind of update and share information with the Board of Education about the plans that we're making to address the funding gap that we have with the levy loss that will begin on January 1 of this year. We know that this sharing of information is really a dialogue in terms of picking up the conversation from where it began on October 8th. So October 8th, we had a special board meeting. We began to talk about, in the event that the levy were to fail, here is a plan, blueprints we referred to them, in terms of what we would need to do to address the loss of $13.5 million, 17% of our budget. So we kind of outlined in that meeting this blueprint. And when you think about a blueprint, you know, if you're comparing it to like a home blueprint, you have a drawing that shows that this, you know, blueprint will be for a two-story home, two-car garage. It will have 4 bedrooms and a kitchen and those kinds of things. But it is just a drawing. And then this evening, what we're hoping to do is to begin to talk about the plans that we are beginning to make, the steps that we're beginning to take to construct, you know, what that blueprint says we have to do. And again, what we have to do is address a $13.5 million loss for the district. And so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. Most importantly, the feature, and this is something that we have not done before, but most importantly, the feature this evening is when we get to the portion of the plan, the blueprint, we will hear from the people that are charged with, helping create that blueprint and also having to live in that part of the house. So we're going to hear from the administrators as they talk through what this means, especially through the lens of the impact on students. So we'll have some guest speakers, so we have some empty chairs here that we'll soon be asking administrators to come, go over those. And it gives the board a chance and an opportunity to have a conversation, to learn more, to ask questions, to have that follow-up, with the folks that are intimately involved with those aspects of our operations. There are, as Mr. Bennington said, there's a regular board meeting scheduled for this Monday. Individuals will have a chance to watch this, to talk about it, to observe, to give board members feedback. So there will be opportunities for public participation at that meeting. And I know the board is planning on future engagement with the community as well. So again, this is just an update in terms of from October 8th to where we are today. Now that we know we have a direction from the community in terms of the funding level, now it's up to us to right-size our operations to fit that funding level. And so that's what you'll hear, this evening. So there will be no votes that will take place today. This isn't a list of employees or anything like that. It is just taking that October 8th plan and beginning to fill in that drawing. So there are some steps that we're considering that we're going to share with the board. As we've gotten into this, we've asked the staff to turn over every stone in terms of where we can find savings. And we want to redirect those savings into the classroom as much as we can. And so you'll hear some things that were uncovered as we're beginning to work that weren't part of the October 8th conversation, but I think are relevant for the board to hear about those conversations and perhaps in the near future give us direction as to how we want to proceed with that. So tonight's about sharing information. It's about getting an update and getting that information. So it's a different kind of board meeting, and it's one that I think is important to help gain an understanding as we go forward. So we want to begin with some financial implications. And I've got 3 slides here, student athlete, a musician, and a teacher. And I want you to picture that runner, crossing the runners crossing the finish line. And you see that runner and you think that is a pretty special moment. And when you think about reductions and things that are happening, it's like, okay, we just want to focus on that runner crossing that finish line. And what does it take just for that runner to cross the finish line? Or in the next slide, it'll be the musician who's playing that solo, or the teacher who's delivering that lesson. And you think that's it. That's all you see as a resident or community member is that moment in time. But what this represents here is all the things that it takes to get that runner to that finish line, to get that musician to the stage where they're playing that solo, or the teacher to have that lesson. And so here, for example, with the student athlete, you have that student athlete who's crossing the finish line. But we know there are coaches behind that student athlete who helped train and condition the team, who looks after the team, who does all of those things to get them to that race. There's physically a bus driver that drove them to that meet in that location. There was a custodian back at the school who opened up the locker room so they could grab their materials to get on the bus or greet them when they're coming off the bus. There is a secretary in transportation who got an order for a bus to be at this location at this time and scheduled it with the driver. There's another secretary that's relaying that information to the transportation secretary saying, this is what we need. Here's the schedule. This is where we're going. And then you have the athletic director who sends a note to the treasurer's office saying we need to pay the officials, we need an entry fee, and they handle that. And then you have a principal who's in charge of the athletic program, who's making sure all the students are eligible. You have some ticket takers that we have to schedule. You have an athletic director who signs a contract with the schools to attend that, who secures workers for that event. And it kind of goes on and on. So when we talk about the positions that we're going to talk about, they all play a hand in getting that student athlete to that finish line, to that moment. And what we're beginning to do is we're starting to poke holes in that structure that supports that student athlete. With the student musician, the same kinds of things that are here. There's beginning to poke some holes into what gets them to that performance and to perform at that level. And of course, the teacher, the center of what we do in our mission, again, it is all the things that go into delivering that moment when they're teaching that lesson. And nailing it in the classroom, like this is what we do. But the department heads, the deans, the curriculum, the technology, all those things have to come together and click. So tonight when you hear about a reduction in technology and the reduction of tech workers, reduction in custodian, no department heads, know that all of them have a hand in getting to that critical moment. They're all important. They all play an important role in making Perrysburg what it is and making our staff and our students perform at a very high level. So the idea that, these positions can kind of slip away, understand that we see just the tip, the peak. But there's so much that goes underneath that makes that moment happen. So as we start to go through this, we want to make sure that we're kind of, laying that foundation of how all these things are connected. And when you start to pull people out of that lineup, something's going to be a little bit off. And people will compensate and do what they can to fill that. But it won't be exactly the same because it can't. So beginning on January 1 of 2025, we will no longer collect $13,415,952. So the 2019 five-year incremental levy is set to expire, and it was not, a levy that was replacing that was not passed. Homeowners will see a reduction in their taxes for each $100,000 of home value, $28, roughly $28 per month. And so that is what will happen on, beginning on January 1. We're not out of the woods. And I think it's important to really hear this for a moment. We are not out of the woods. The plan that we talked about on October 8th takes funds, one-time funds, from our cash balance. And those funds enable us from January 1, when we stop collecting that, through the rest of this year to finish up this year without having to do midterm or mid-year reductions. The $6 million of cuts that we're going to talk about get us through the beginning of next year. But if we aren't successful in passing a levy next year, if we, the board, chooses to put a levy of significant lesser amount, there will be more reductions that will have to take place, and we'll spend a little bit of time going through how that works and why that is. So we're really not out of the woods. So a failure next year means that we wouldn't have the ability mid-year to get through that year, because we've already pulled the amount that we can afford to out of the cash balance. So we have folks that are talking about, well, if we raise funds and we want to save this program or that program, we'd like to do that now. It's really challenging, and we've responded to those folks who've said that. We love the passion, we love the enthusiasm. We want you to be part of that solution. But understand, if we're a patient and we're on the gurney and we're bleeding out, we have to save the patient first. And when we save the patient, we can repair the hand. And those activities are essential, just like your hand is. But if the patient dies, there's no use for a hand. And that's what we're facing in terms of not being out of the woods. So we understand that we need to get direction from the board in the weeks ahead as to what that path is forward. And tonight is a first step in having that conversation. So the reduction plan, again, we kind of talked about that, and we'll talk about the cash balance. And I know Randy did a great job on November 18th when he did his 5-year forecast in terms of projecting out what the district needs. From his conversation, we are beginning on January of 2025, we're basically reverting to the funding level that we had in 2021. So 2020, 2021 school year is where we're heading back in terms of the revenue level that we have today. Since 2021, we've added 330 more students. We've added 33 and a half teachers since 2021. And of course, since 2021, we know the costs of goods and services have increased. We are not immune to inflation. And that's very real to schools. When we talk about the cost of a gallon of milk increasing, we understand that because we buy milk for about 3,800 kids who bought lunch today. So we understand that. In his report, Mr. Dreyer talked about 84% of our general fund is instruction, operations, transportation, student support. 84% of our budget is people. When you go to the high school or you go to Fort Meigs or Woodland right now, the building's empty. There's very few supplies there. There isn't an inventory there. Our business model, and all schools' business model, is an empty building, and we pay people to go in front of those classrooms and teach those students. We pay other people to go out and pick those students up and bring them to school and take them home. And then we pay others to help out around that function. So we don't have large machines and equipment that we're investing in. We don't have rail cars. We don't have an inventory of metal or products. That's our model, is people. So that's essential. Going back to 2021, the amount of negotiated agreements, the percentage increase compared to the consumer price index in terms of how inflation, we've settled contracts well below what the cost of living has been. I think the board's been very responsible in how it has treated its employees and the taxpayers. And so that's important. When we talk about the going back to October 8th, when we did a summary of all those positions, we saw that this was the summary. 3 administrators, 26 teachers, 3 exempt, 24 classified, paraprofessionals, 3 contracted employees, 2. And when you think about going back to funding levels of 2021, we've added 330 more students. We've added 33 and a half teachers since 2021. Our plan is reducing 26 teachers. So you can begin to see, when you look at the plan, what we've added in that time, in that window, we're really having to right-size our budget back to what it was in 2021 and deal with the reality that we have 330 more students than we did then. And that's what this plan has to do and what it has to accomplish moving forward. Understanding, I think, cash balance, there's been some things about the cash balance. And I've had people and even some staff members say, well, we have a cash balance. We don't need to make any reductions. So Randy and I will kind of walk through what that is. But when you think about your home, and how you operate your home and what people recommend in schools and even applying some of those principles to your home, you want in your checking savings account enough money to have a couple months where you could pay your bills and survive if for some emergency, if something were to happen. In school districts, we follow that same kind of principle. So, in the 5-year forecast, Randy talked about, trying to achieve 120 days of true cash. That's 4 months. We'll talk a little bit about, trying to maintain 2 months cash balance. And so when you talk about that balance, it's designed to provide an adequate cash balance to pay our bills. And we'll talk about the timing of that and how that actually works here in a moment. But we also have some other restricted funds. So for example, food service has a cash balance. Those funds are restricted, and we can only spend those funds on cafeteria and food service. So we can't pull funds out of that and apply it in other areas. Permanent improvement funds are restricted. We can't pull permanent improvement dollars from that levy and apply it to paying people or programs. And then finally, we're self-insured. And the money that we have in our insurance fund, pulling that money out and spending it, that would mean that we would have to be, at some point, taking money out of the general fund that is used for educational purposes to pay medical bills. So we keep that fund separated, and we restrict those funds just for the purpose of, being available for the medical insurance. So that's something that we continue to do. This was shown on October 8th, and it shows that $13 million shortfall, the one-time cash balance, that covers our operations starting on January 1 and through the end of the year, school year, and then $6 million in reductions to kick off the school year. That's how we're doing that. There will be a growing gap of funding when we, as costs continue to rise. So I think this is an important chart. And this is what Randy showed in his 5-year forecast. And we've kind of displayed it in a different way so that people can understand. So school districts have this cash balance. And I like to think of it, you see these in fiscal year 24-25, you see two distinct peaks. There's one that is roughly in July and August, and then there's another smaller peak in March, February, March, in that window. So that is our paydays. That's the day when we get our state aid payment, local tax collections all come into the district. So in your home, that is your payday. So in Perrysburg, staff gets paid on the 5th and the 20th of every month. So if you were to take a snapshot picture of a staff member's bank account at 12:01 a.m. on the 5th of any given month, it would look like that tall peak. And if you said to that staff member, you're flush with cash, you should go to Hawaii with all the money that you have, they would begin to say something like, well, that money isn't there. That money is going to be spent in the weeks ahead over, automobile, payment or loans or all the, mortgage, insurance, groceries, heat, electricity, all those things. And that's how it works with schools. So you see that what happens after that peak is we start to pay our bills until the next payment. So that's how that works. So folks who are focusing in and saying they have more than enough cash, they don't need to make any reductions, is ignoring what happens in the days and weeks and months, in our case, what happens after we get that pay. And you can see here that what happens is it begins to dip. Now in that column, you have established 2 months true days cash. So that's the line that we don't want to go below. And if we go below that 2 months true day cash, when we hit those valleys before the next pay, we would have to begin to possibly borrow money to make payroll, to pay the bills. So you can see that dip, that up. So next year, you can see what begins to happen. Two things I want to point out. One, that peak isn't as high as it was before because we're not collecting on that levy. The valley goes much deeper. And then you look at that, establish a 2-month, 2 days cash, that line in the next year moves up a little bit because the cost of doing business from year over to year, even with the reductions that we're proposing, goes up. So we become dangerously close to being in a position where we might not have enough cash to pay the bills, to do the things that we do without having to borrow or do those kinds of things. And then you see a divergence right there. In the blue, that follows Randy's 5-year forecast. So that shows us that based on his 5-year forecast, which we said at that meeting, this is not a recommendation. It's not saying that's what the board will do. But to keep above that line, $14 million would be necessary. That $14 million would be new funds to the district. That $14 million replaces the $13.5 million that went away and keeps those $6 million of cuts in place. So those aren't coming back with that $14 million. And you can see with that, we almost touched that two months worth of cash. The second line that is shown there is if nothing happens. So you see that peak fall, and then we go below in May and June of next school year. So when we talk about doing mid-year reductions, it's because we are beginning to fall below that line that we're comfortable with in terms of being able to operate. Then we get our state aid payments, again, not quite as high, and then we begin to pay our bills, to pay staff, to do the things. And then we run out of money. So if it takes $14 million for us to stay above that 2-month cash balance line, it would take about $14 million of additional cuts to stay above that line without any new funding. So when I say that the patient is on the table and it's bleeding, this is the trail of blood that we're beginning to watch. This is the decision that this board will have to make in terms of which path do we take. More importantly, this is the decision that the community will have to take in terms of what does it want for its school district. But the $6 million cut, that remains intact. And additional cuts may be coming. And that's where I spoke earlier about, we need to save the patient before we get to discussing the hand. All the activities and things that we're talking about that people are concerned about as well as we are, and you'll hear that from the principals, those are important things. But the core of what we do, the heartbeat of what we do, will be forever changed. And it's not a threat. It's not us trying to portray things. This is why we asked for the funds that we asked for last time in November, to keep above that line, to continue to grow. We understand that that's not available to us. We'll come up with a plan to do the very best we can, and you're going to hear what that plan is from those folks. But I think it's important to get that visual of how the next 2 years are going to be playing out and the implications of those and the impact it will have on our students that we serve. So we'll kind of get into that. So the October 8th reduction plan, we're beginning to reduce costs today. We're want to provide an update in terms of what we're doing. Don Christie, our Human Resources Director, is working on seniority lists and licensure, job classifications, all the things that we need to do to create a reduction in force list. And we'll be talking about that and bringing that to the board when the time comes for the board to vote on that so that we can issue those reductions. And of course, the timeline for the reductions will follow the Ohio Revised Code and establish protocols and bumping and all of those kinds of things that we do. So Staffing reductions are planned for next year. Unfilled positions that we're experiencing now that are slated to be cut, we're taking a hard look at not filling those. And you know, custodians, for example, you'll hear this evening how we've already begun to do that, and we're feeling the pinch of what that means to our operations and what we do. So we want to hold meetings with staff, continuing the dialogue, which we have. Those are underway, keeping them informed. And I know that the board wants to schedule community engagement sessions and keep the public informed, and I know the board will hear about that Monday, some ideas about putting together a plan, and the board is leading that initiative and directing us to make that possible. So looking back at the levy in Ohio, we had 142 school levies on November 5th. 50% of them failed, 71 levies failed. A lot of Perrysburg-like school districts were part of that. Avon Lake, you know, is in a process where they're looking at a combo, bond issue and levy. And you know, this is from one of the Cleveland papers. Marysville, which is a suburb of Columbus, failed their second levy. Finley, our colleagues just to the south, experiencing some tremendous, you know, reductions like us. Westerville, Bowling Green. This is something that is being played out in districts that look and feel a lot like Perrysburg. So we want to begin with the update on the actual reduction plan. So at this time, we'll begin with the junior high and high school. And so we have some representatives of those buildings to come and take a seat, and we'll begin to go over that information. So give them a minute to transition up here. Take it out. Yeah, thank you. So we have with us Mr. Cookson, principal at Perrysburg High School. Thank you, Mr. Cookson. I know you're missing some student activities this evening.
Yeah.
As our other guest, Mr. Scott Bucher, principal at the junior high, who is supposed to be reading at a band concert, so the night before Christmas, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you for being here. And Mr. Chuck Jaco, I'm sure there's an athletic event taking place somewhere in the district as we speak. So, gentlemen, thank you for taking the time. And so we'll begin with, this was from October 8th, the list of positions that, staffing positions from the high school and junior high that'll be reduced. So maybe we'll start with there. And
Sure. Okay. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Something that obviously is weighing on all of us in the building. But as Mr. Hostler mentioned, that we're going to try to make the best out of the situation that we currently have. So I want to touch base on a few of the positions here at PHS that will be non-existent next year, starting with our academic piece, speaking about world language, speaking about our music program as well, because those are the two main content areas that will be affected most next year in terms of academics. With our world language, with the reduction of an ASL teacher and Spanish teacher, as well as one period of Chinese, that'll obviously increase classroom sizes in those areas, as well as not being able to give the students as much one-on-one attention as they currently receive. And I know the music programs as well will be not able to offer all the programs, the great programs that they currently offer our students and our community as well. And I know that's something that we'll work through, and we'll work with the teachers to be able to do the best that we can. But in order to pull off a lot of the programs that they do and performances that they do, it takes a lot of people. It's a heavy lift because of the quality that they put out there. every single program that they put out. Also, I want to touch on our student support services and our Dean of Students. They have a big role at the high school. We do have students who need additional support, with drug and alcohol prevention, as well as mental health, and with the elimination of some of those student support services in our Dean of Students, that will be a gap that we'll obviously work hard to fill. But they do so much on a daily basis that will be a challenge to best support our students, but also families as well at the high school. I guess in a nutshell, for this slide, for the high school, there'll be less electives offered as well, not only in world language and music, but also across the board through all content areas, which lessens the ability for us to meet the passions and interests of our students. Also, the larger class sizes, which I already mentioned, and finally, just that the less support for our students and for our families who really do need that support. I guess, would you like to speak on that piece? Okay.
All right. Like Aaron said, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak a little bit. And going through the junior high situation here, I'll start with our three music teachers. I just want to make sure to clarify, as you'll see the band, the orchestra, and the vocal music as 0.5 right there. So it's a half position each. So I think it's important to know that our current setup at the junior high is we have 2 band teachers who co-teach in the morning 4 sections of a band class, 2 choir teachers with 3 sections, and then 2 orchestra teachers for 2. And then in the afternoon, those 3 go to HPI to provide music services at HPI. By eliminating the half position, we're eliminating that co-teaching piece of it, which has a huge effect on the students that we can serve. Being able to do the co-teaching model that we have in the music allows us to take students with really limited music background, and we can use the 2 teachers to sectionalize the students specific to the individual needs and the experiences of the kids, and also break it apart with the instrument base. Have a section of students solely work on violin or cello or whatever it might be with that. It also allows us the opportunity to have certain specialized classes, with it. For example, with our orchestra program, we have 2 grade level orchestra classes, like a grade 7 orchestra class, a grade 8 orchestra class, but we also have a ensemble class that's a mixture of both 7th and 8th grade students. That's a tryout based. And then in the band world, once again, we have like sections of like 7th grade band, 8th grade band, but we also have 2 sections of what we call a 7-8 band, which is a smaller design class that's really intentional for students who are just starting out in the instrument to provide that extra attention with that. And then with the changes, with the music program, those specialty classes would not happen anymore. Then we would also have to take a look at that individual attention in the musics, with bringing in students who are just beginning to learn an instrument. They're not going to get the direct teaching that they have, which is going to lead to, like, what we think could happen, lead to frustration and students not wanting to continue with the instrument because they're not getting that individualized attention that they've had before. Like Aaron had said, in terms of, the junior high music program is an incredible program, and through the OMEA process and community events and the concerts, and having the 2 directors in there helps and goes a long way to be able to construct all those different things that need to happen. So all of those different components that we do in addition in the music program with the OMEAs, with the community events, with the honors, the sectionals that we do, we do some collaborations with BGSU. That becomes very difficult then handle with only 1 music person, in each position with that. You'll see up there 2 gifted ELA teachers And so right now, the model for the junior high is we have a gifted 7th grade teacher and a gifted 8th grade teacher for ELA. And students have to qualify for the gifted services through some state benchmarking indicators, with that. And both of those teachers currently teach 4 sections of a gifted ELA, class. So what happens is, obviously, not having those positions, which we're not required to serve for those gifted ELA, brings those gifted students back into our general 7th grade ELA and our general 8th grade ELA class. So it's going to be up to the teachers to stretch those students in the gen ed class, in which we have full confidence that they're able to. With that, so our gifted students may not get the individual attention and that stretching of the curriculum that they're currently getting with that as well. But there's a ripple down effect to that as well. The current setup at the junior high, which is worked out really well for us, is in ELA, like our typical grade 7 ELA teacher and a grade 8 ELA teacher would each teach 4 sections of that grade level class. And then their 5th section would be a lab class. Where it's designated to work with their students that they have that need the most support. And we do a data review process on a quarterly basis to look at our student data on what kids need those individual supports. And then obviously we call home, talk to families, and it's a fluid situation where we can put those students in that lab class to get those supports. Taking the ELA gifted out of that, and then also with the larger class enrollments coming to us in grades 6 and 5 from HPI, we're no longer going to be able to have those lab classes with reasonable class sizes. So the gifted ELA piece not only is affecting our gifted students, it's also affecting our students that we need to provide a lot of support with in the ELA curriculum, with that. So it is a true ripple down effect with that. And if we don't make that adjustment, we'll be kind of looking at almost 30 kids per classroom in an ELA classroom, which you simply can't manage very well with those numbers.
Scott, if I could stop you, before you go on, you mentioned the band and you mentioned class size for ELA. Just what is an approximate, when we talk about 2 teachers with the band program, how many kids are in band? So I think people understand
absolutely.
that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So the general band classes, we have like a grade 7 and a grade 8 band, have between 40 and 45 students in it with the 2 teachers. That 7-8 band, that's designed for students just learning an instrument, or maybe some students who have some complex needs to be in there. That's right around 18 to 20. And those would be the classes that we don't know if we'd be able to offer anymore, because of not having those dynamics with that.
Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So you see the trickle down effect with the ELA piece of it, and then also with the band piece of it as well too. And obviously the assistant principal position is a critical position. With the way we currently have set up. I'd like to think that our administrative team is a very hands-on team with students. Part of the things that makes the junior high really special is we have a class schedule that has collaboration time built into it with both our department-based TBTs and also a teaming TBT. So the teaming TBTs is your math, science, social studies, English, intervention specialists, have a full period 3 days a week so we can talk about student issues, do tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 interventions, support, and our assistant principals and myself and our counselors attend those meetings on a regular basis to help with the processing and organizing to provide those supports for the students. And same way when we do our department, which is like your entire 8th grade ELA or your entire 7th grade, we're in those meetings as well too. And I can go on and on about the roles of the assistant principal, but it definitely will change the dynamics of the building and what we're able to do in terms of being hands-on with teachers and students and being able to provide those supports. It's going to be a reallocation of workload administratively and then in the student services office with it as well.
So we'll kind of, maybe begin just to talk about, so these, from October 8th, we began to talk about the activities. So these slides represent the activities that will be eliminated next year. So there were the high school, junior high, and then we have the building leadership teams, the curricular resources, 10 department chairs. And then here are the programs that are going to be offered, and then the ones that aren't in terms of activities and clubs that you can see what's being struck out won't be back. So there are opportunities for kids to still participate, and you can see kind of when it gets to band and athletics, extracurriculars, you can see the things that are being reduced and things that are still in play. So that's kind of a total look, and and then this is the reductions for the high school athletics. And then for junior high, again, following the same format with the high school, you can see the different activities that are being planned. And so I'll kind of pause there and maybe Chuck talk a little bit about from the high school perspective, and then maybe wrap up with just the reductions of the different clubs and what that means from your perspectives.
Yeah, good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to provide some clarification if you have questions. For somebody who has devoted 30 years to school-based athletics, it was definitely a disheartening task, but it's one that had to be done from our department and looking from a global view of what can we cut and have the least amount of impact totally on our interscholastic athletic program. We these assistants, the way they're listed in the supplementals, I want to make sure you understand that whether you're a JV coach, a varsity assistant, or freshman, it's called assistant coach in our supplementals. So when you see these assistant coaches, these are freshman programs. So basically baseball assistant, that's your 9th grade baseball coach. And then when you get to soccer, those are JVB programs. So that's our freshman level for the most part for soccer, and then all the weight room supervisors that are there for all athletes to be supervised. This will impact probably 140 kids that we have playing freshman sports, but it's also not going to just impact the freshmen. So what will happen here is that you'll have a JV team in which really the 10th and 11th graders will be impacted because there's going to be cuts. And so, your top 6 freshmen and your top 6 10th and 11th graders make the JV, and then, so the student athletes, it's not just a freshman, incoming freshmen. They'll have opportunities now. There are other sports, that just have JV or varsity. And to the junior high, to speak on their behalf, why there are no cuts to the sports, because down at that level, if you eliminated, they only have 2 fall sports, 2 winter sports, 1 spring sport. So they'd have 0 opportunities, where at the high school, there's, cutting the freshmen, there's still opportunity for the student athletes. But this would, impact approximately 9 coaches and some supervision in the weight room, and about approximately 150 kids will be impacted from rosters.
And then just to wrap up with the clubs and activities that are non-athletic, and BLTs, department heads.
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit to the BLT. The BLT, the building leadership serves as department heads at the junior high. It's a group of teachers that we meet on a regular basis. It would be like almost like our advisory board administratively at the junior high. We've really tried to emphasize a shared leadership culture at the junior high, with empowering our teachers and empowering our leaders in our building, and building their capacity. And our building leadership team has really been the critical piece of that, as the voice, not only with our administrative team, our student services team, but then with their TBTs as well too. So a lot of our decision making, our data review process, the big picture thinking goes through our BLT, and their insights and their advice and their experiences, more than anything, are absolutely essential to the operation and the growth of our building, directly towards our teacher growth and our student growth as well too. So the elimination of the BLT, and they have in our building, odd jobs that they're responsible for as a department head, such as department budgets, curricular supplies, things like that, that those roles and responsibilities are going to be absorbed elsewhere with this. So that will be a tremendous loss for us. But once again, it's more of like a culture thing of that shared leadership and the students that's going to be affected, but we're going to try to keep that intact the best that we can. From a club standpoint, from the junior high perspective, Chuck had kind of talked about the athletics, with the junior high. The first thing that, I tell all the sixth graders when they come to us in May from each in the middle is how to be successful in the junior high is to get involved. The very first thing I tell our seventh graders at our first day of school with the web orientation day is get involved. The first thing I tell our eighth graders at our class meeting, their first day of school, is get involved. And so, we really want to have an environment where students have a sense of belonging and they feel connected to their school. And I think we're really aware and in tune that for a lot of kids, it's an extracurricular that brings them that connection to the school, with it. So it is through and have to decide what goes and what doesn't. From our perspective, we were looking at experiences. Is there certain things that we have similar experiences available already that the students that were part of that piece of it can jump into something that they already have or something that's already available, with it. Just looking at some of the cuts that we have, extracurricular wise, that it's going to make a big difference on our student participation numbers. Winter Running Club was one of those. We have 85 students. A part of that, our Math Counts, who goes to Columbus and competes on an annual basis, has about 25 students. Our mock trial program has been very successful. Has about 25 students, and they compete at a state level in Columbus with what they do there. Our Power of the Pen is another organization that competes at a district and state level, often going to the University of Tiffin, Lourdes College, and Ashland University and competes there. They got about 25 kids that do that. And so it definitely is going to be an effect, for the kids who find that sense of belonging. And like I said, we're hopeful that with the options that are remaining, that those kids find a sense of joy in that belonging with another opportunity that we have.
Very similar to what Scott said, I'll start with our department heads, our department chairs. We use them pretty much interchangeably with our building leadership team. They do serve as a liaison between the administrative team and their departments, and obviously filtering down to the students. And they're an integral part of the way we do business at the high school. I put a lot of trust in them as the building principal to carry out the mission vision of our high school and to filter that down to their department members. And they do have a lot of odd jobs, you would say. They order materials for the year for the departments. They're the head of the curriculum in their departments. They run their department meetings. They provide up-to-date content topics and just do a lot of odds and ends that go unseen. So that'll be a really big loss with the 10 department chairs going away. So I thank them every day that they do what they do. So that'll be a big loss. Our supplementals on the one slide, Mr. Hosler, if you can go back to our main supplemental. I'm going to talk more about the district-approved clubs and activities. You heard from Mr. Jaco regarding our sports, but we have currently 66 ways in which students can get involved and connect with Perrysburg High School, and at least one adult in the high school, which research says is really one of the most important things for student success at the high school level. We have 66 currently, 25 of which receive a stipend or a supplemental, and 41 which do not. So teachers are working, without pay for those. So I commend those teachers for taking time away from their families and their lives to spend it with our students. A lot of those, most of the clubs and activities that received a stipend this year will not next year. We did preserve some for reasons of being able to reach the most students as possible, like our student council, and also to provide students with that high school experience, positive high school experience, which I think is so important. to meet the needs of the whole child. So, for example, our student council, we will still have a student council next year to run things like homecoming and prom and some of the things that they do. And that's just a large group, so we can have a lot of student involvement there. And also national organizations like National Honor Society, which is very important for students too as they go off to college. We're going to preserve that. So we took a real long, hard look at this list, and obviously all of these clubs and activities are vital, very important for that student connection piece. But we had to make difficult decisions. My hope is that our students obviously still can find their niche at the high school through the things that we can preserve. These won't have as many options, and I think that is it. Okay.
To kind of piggyback off what Mr. Cookson said, the things you see on these slides, these are the things that come with a paid supplemental contract. So what he was clarifying was that there are other district-sponsored clubs and activities without a paid contract that could potentially still occur if there is a staff member that would still want to lead that district-sponsored club or activity. So just wanted to clarify where you might see some imbalance of some activities, versus sports. There are other district-sponsored activities that could still be available to students that don't come with that paid supplemental contract. And then additionally, you look at these things, these are tough decisions. This is what makes Perrysburg. It's hard. But when you total up all of those supplemental contracts, you're talking $400,000. That's 6 teachers. So, those are the decisions that we have to make.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And you have questions, board members?
Just because I'm receiving questions about what's being cut and not, and I don't know how to interpret forensics. People want to know if speech and debate, mock trial, can you just clarify that one for me?
Yeah, forensics / speech and debate,
Okay.
synonymous. Yeah, will be one that is cut. So,
What concerns you all the most in these reductions?
From our situation with athletics, there's going to be some unintended outcomes of transfers, right? Kids are going to pursue other options, possibly. When you look at our success we've had at the varsity level, when you take away your farm system, there's a reason why we're very competitive. We've got great coaches and good student athletes that are learning our systems, and you pull that away, that's one less tier that leads to our success, and it will impact our Northern Lakes League. It will mess the scheduling up. It will impact other members of our league, not having those teams.
I think for me, I think I kind of touched on it. The whole student support and the ripple down effects is what keeps me up at night. Every night thinking about, we have an incredible staff and incredible structure at the junior high. We've got great kids, largely because we've been able to support those kids in such great ways over my 8 years of being an administrator in the building. And knowing that, that sense of belonging with the clubs and the extracurriculars, some of those things aren't there. A lot of them are, which we're very thankful for. But some ripple down effects, and I kind of talked about it with the gifted ELA, positions. That doesn't just affect our gifted ELA population, it also affects our intervention, students who need that extra help or just need that pre-teaching before a lesson in that lab, or going in with that lab teacher and building their confidence to feel good to participate in class that next day because they have that time, that extra time with that. We still provide intervention. It's just going to have to look different, and it's going to create some really good conversations about how to provide that within the classroom. But between that and some other things you'll learn about a little bit later tonight with student services and things like that, our student support is definitely my biggest concern. We're very hands-on. I would like to say, like I said, the junior high with our administrative and student services teams. being in and not only working with our students, but also working and brainstorming and problem solving with our staff and trying to connect with families and bring them in and, and talk about, trying to, the whole idea of delayed gratification education. If we put the work in with kids in the junior high, it's going to lead to success at the high school level in their futures. We may not necessarily see it at the junior high, but we know the work is working based on the results that the kids are getting coming out of the high school. And that's largely because of the support that we've been able to offer on an individual basis or small group basis, not only in a classroom piece of it, but with those other intangibles, check-ins, and all these different things that's going to be affected in a lot of different ways. So, like I said, that's what keeps me up at night.
So I just wanted to double check, Mrs. Price, real quick. Just regarding the supplementals, on like slide 39, are those, I know the ones that aren't a paid supplemental have been eliminated, but those are all paid on these slides that aren't crossed out? On all of the slides, right? Correct. All right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
I guess from my vantage point, it's definitely similar to what Scott's worries were. Our students' needs, social and emotional needs, our students, peer influences and other things that they're just experiencing right now are increasing, and they have been increasing. And without the supports that are currently in place, it's going to be that much more difficult to meet the needs of our students and also their families, because we do service a lot of families as well and help them through difficult times. And I think we do a really good job of that with a lot of hardworking people that put a ton of time, effort, energy, and love into what they do. And our students are definitely going to be, they'll feel it. Our families will feel it as well, because those people just won't be around. So I really feel for them. Obviously, we'll figure out the best way we can support those students and those families still, but it's going to be that much more difficult, especially in a timely manner. And then just the connectedness to school. Students are more and more in isolation, and I hear all the time, "Hey, Mr. Cookson, I come to school because of football or the chess club or the musicals." I hear that all the time, and that's a big pull for kids, and with less choice and more limitations on what they can choose to get connected with at the high school, which hopefully we still have some things that they'll enjoy and want to be involved with, and make connections with those adults. That'll be something too that will definitely take getting used to, and trying our best to provide those connections for them.
Thank you.
Something, before you gentlemen go, when I went through this presentation, I actually got through all the slides, Tom. I want to preface what I'm going to say, that I am not second guessing you, and I don't want to make that impression. I'm just throwing out stuff to see where it sticks. Because I got 2 emails today about the band program. I think that's going to be probably the biggest scream that we're going to hear, because we have such an outstanding music program beginning at HPI on up. So I'm sitting there thinking, what can we do? You see the half here and the half there, and you wonder what's going on. I talked to Eric about it, and it really is kind of a wackadoodle idea. I saw that you were getting rid of a Spanish teacher, but oddly not a French teacher. So is there any possibility in all of the language classes that I've taken over the years of making language, and I'm thinking French and Spanish because I'm not that familiar with Chinese, couldn't those be online classes? You can learn those classes online. I've done Rosetta Stone. I've done Pimsleur. I can never say that right. Doesn't say much for my language skills. But if those two classes for those 2 years were either done with the guidance of a teacher to make sure that they're meeting state benchmarks, but did it online, wouldn't that open up some classrooms for you? Wouldn't that open up some time for teachers? Wouldn't that allow maybe some reduction in costs that maybe we could get one of those halves back in our band programs or whatever? And then for year 3 and 4, we need that teacher because most of those programs are not meant to be at the 3 and 4 level. You get into a lot of reading, you get into a lot of culture, you do all that kind of stuff. And again, I don't know what to say as far as Chinese is concerned, but if I were looking at going after the language programs, I would probably keep Spanish and Chinese because those are the languages of the world right now over French, though that was my personal favorite. But sign language, you cannot do that online. I know BGSU tries it. I know a lot of students who did that, and they said it was horrible. It was a terrible way to learn sign language. But sign language with the with ODEWs, I almost said ODU, with ODEWs focus on workforce, that's a language that these kids, when they graduate, especially if they can do the full 4 years or even 3 years of it, gives them a viable job opportunity right out of high school. And I thought, gee whiz, I'm probably sure that y'all thought of all this, but it was something that popped through my mind that if I was cutting something, that's probably how I would do it, or to use Owens for CCP classes. They've got a great sign language program over there, or I don't know what they do for anything else with that. But I would actually drop the 8th. I didn't see that on there. In Mr. Bucher, in the junior high, are you keeping the 8th grade language classes?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, see, if I would almost get rid of that and try to keep our music programs over keeping. I know that gives the kids a 5th year, but
One of the complications is, to be honest, is a seat thing. So we have 430 8th grade students and a 7-period day, and so we're actually in a position now where we need actually more electives for our 8th grade students to be able to take. And so if you took away our 8th grade language classes, with it, it would even, make that need even greater, with it. I think one of the things that it's unique about our 8th graders is, and I would argue that maybe your first year of language is the one that you actually need a dynamic teacher in there to get them bought into it and get them enthusiastic about the content, with it. Because I think with language, a foreign language, as an 8th grader, if it's online, we've seen that the kids don't engage very well and are meaningful with their online instruction. I think we saw that in COVID a lot. We battle the computers a little bit right now too. And the teachers that we have right now teaching language in 8th grade are really engaging. They get the kids bought into it, they sink into it, and then that takes them up to Aaron's level at the high school, and they're committed. And I think that's a big piece of it, is to be committed to that moving forward. And I think there's no better way to be committed to something unless there's that connection with that person they're teaching. And that's a testament to the teachers that we have in that place, that they leave our building loving that language, and most of them continue to go on to the high school level. So I would actually fear that if we got rid of our language programs, that they may not pursue it, or if we would do an online version of it, that it would be a one and done, and there actually probably wouldn't progress to the high school level. That would be my fear with it.
Well, I can definitely understand that. It's certainly not optimal. None of this is optimal. None of this is Perrysburg. And like I say, I was doing my level best to try and think out of the box. And if I've learned anything over the years is that every time I come up with an idea, this guy tells me about all the dominoes that go into what I thought was a great idea. So, okay, no, it makes sense. I just felt like I had to ask. I'm sure, I knew that y'all had thought about it, but I just hate to see problems with our music program when they're just nationally recognized. And that just seems this side of criminal to have to do that.
Can I clarify the foreign language? Did I hear, like the ASL, you're not getting rid of Spanish, we're just reducing a teacher. So you'll still have a Spanish program at the high school.
Right.
Correct.
You'll still have an
Correct.
ASL program at the high school, but we all know
Correct.
that ASL is so hard to find a teacher for
Yeah,
that.
very difficult.
I know Perrysburg has struggled
Yeah,
for several years, as have I.
yeah,
Right, so we're not eliminating, to clarify for everybody in the community, there's
Correct.
still going to be Spanish.
Correct.
There's still going to be ASL.
correct.
It's just, you're reducing the number of teachers in the program.
Correct, exactly. Ms. Larimer, you'll be happy to hear that we do currently partner with Owens for CCP. And we're partnering with Ohio School for the Deaf for ASL through online instruction. Yeah, for our level one, some of our level one students, and it's going really, really well. So,
It's pretty cool.
yes, we are preserving ASL as much as possible because we know that's important, and it is grant funded by the state of Ohio because they know the need for interpreters, but also for ASL instructors. So,
And you said grant funded?
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, even better. Yeah.
This question's for Mr. Cookson. With the reduction of foreign language and freshman sports, is this going to become an issue down the road for our high school students, especially with graduation requirements?
With the world language, they'll still be able to choose, from the 4 that we still offer from Chinese, ASL, French, or Spanish. So the reduction, I don't think, will affect honors diploma or the ability to meet graduation requirements. The class sizes will get a little bit larger, obviously, but no, that shouldn't affect graduation requirements or honors diploma because they still have those opportunities for both. And then the freshman sports, in regards to,
Pretty much in regards to the gym waiver.
it will limit them somewhat. They will still have the opportunity, the freshmen, like Mr. Jaco alluded to, still have the opportunity to participate in sports. And if they don't potentially make the sport of their choice, maybe there's another option for them to be able to take part in, or they can get the waiver in other areas outside of sports as well, if they're involved in other activities. I assume you're referring to the 2 years of sports before their senior year, or a band, or other opportunities as well. So I think it could potentially limit it somewhat, but those opportunities are still there for them.
Will there still be the summer option for PE, or is that no longer an option? Or
Yes, we're still working on summer health, PE, and summer school in general for this upcoming summer.
So you could still take the PE during the summer, which is what my
that is-
oldest did before they allowed marching band.
Yep, that's the plan. Yep.
So then I'm gonna go along with Mrs. Larimer, and I'm gonna be the 12th voice, and I'm sure this is not gonna be a popular statement, but looking at this, I feel there's a disproportionate reduction in the fine arts versus the athletic programs. Just all of them. If you're looking at the junior high, well, I mean, if you're looking at the junior high and you're looking at, I mean, I get it. I coached, I was a varsity athlete. I understand athletics. Also, everybody knows I work for Toledo Public Schools, and I know there's a couple of people in the community, in the audience here that, we've had to, other school districts have had to eliminate big cuts, you know, into athletics. So just looking at this, you know, I just don't, I want to make sure that it's pretty even across the board. And when I look at this, I mean, I don't know numbers in that. It just, to me, it just feels like there's more cuts to the fine arts programs, then there are larger numbers of participation in fine arts than there are for some of these athletic programs. And I don't know if that's just me or, you know, the need for 7th and 8th grade sports. Like I said, don't shoot the messenger. I'm putting it out there because this is these are the people who've come to me that said, why 7th and 8th grade sports? I mean, I get it, but if you're looking at what benefits the bigger and the larger amount of students, are we looking at everything across the board? And I'm not saying a decision right now.
Yeah, I think we've tried to find that balance.
I can speak a little bit to it from a junior high perspective. If you look at it, so like I said before, like we took a look at like comparable experiences. For example, you'll see a stipend that was eliminated, the activity coordinator for Winter Running Club. You know, there's 85 students in the Winter Running Club, but we also offer comparable experiences with cross country and track that are still on the table there. You see from a music standpoint, you'll see the assistant directors in band, orchestra, and choir, you know, with it. So we're still having, so those stipends are put in place to do our concerts. So we're still having the concerts. Those are all still in play, you know, with it, and that's something that we've talked to our music folk about as well too. It just might look different in terms of the length of it or the amount of the concerts that are happening all the way through with that. So all those different experiences are still scheduled to be in play with that. It might entail some more creative work on our administrative team to supervise kids while one grade level performs singing and the other one isn't, because a lot of times that was the dynamics of it. You have one director directing or conducting the music while the other one is doing the supervision from the other grade level. So then there's that piece of it that we work out administratively with that. But those experiences will still hold true, you know, at the junior high. If you look at different things like the math counts and then the power of the pen and the mock trial that were eliminated there, the rationale with those particular things were activities that we were not affiliated with a league or an official organization with, that also had pretty significant expenditures outside with registration fees or travel costs. So mock trial, like I said before, mock trial and math counts competes to Columbus, and these are expenses that are paid out of building level funds, you know, with it, and the same with the power of the doing some registration fees to different events all around Northwest Ohio that kind of go into that. But if, you know, from an art standpoint, the director positions from all three musics are still intact. Like I said, the concerts are still going to go on. Like I said, it might look a little different supervised wise, all the way through there. But then, if you look, the musical, all those stipends, supplementals, the show choir, all those, the STEM, the quiz bowl, student council, it'll stay intact there, yearbook. I think one of our goals would be like to see similar, commonalities at Power of the Pen. There's a lot of commonalities with yearbooks, so it's a similar experience. So that was the rationale with thinking. If you look at our athletic programs in terms of numbers, just kind of going through, so we have for basketball, we have one coach for 7th grade boys basketball, right? We have one coach for 8th grade boys basketball and so forth. Cross country, we have 2 coaches for both boys and girls. And we have about 75 boys on a cross country team, about 70 girls on a cross country team with 2, quite frankly, we're probably understaffed, in terms of supervision with that, right? With the football piece of it, 7th grade and 8th grade, you both have around 50, players on both grade levels, with it. And then in track, there's 25% of our school does track. There's 250 kids, out there with the track piece of it. You did see a couple reduction in forces in athletics with wrestling and cheerleading. Those two positions were relatively new added, but they don't have the student participation numbers that the other ones I just mentioned that did, that you could do appropriate supervision with what we had with that, with those two teams. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit for you with the thought process, at least at the junior high perspective, with it. Like I said, we want to try to keep intact as many experiences as we could, and keep affiliations and things like that in play for us.
Thank you. That was, like I said, I wouldn't be doing my due diligence as a board member. People had asked. You did, and I thank you for putting that out there, because I've been asked several times when people have seen this. And I said, I would do my duty and ask, and I appreciate that clarification along with the numbers.
Mr. Dwyer, a roundabout number on how much summer gym cost the district?
No idea.
No idea.
What cost the district?
Summer PE.
Summer
Oh,
PE?
summer PE.
No idea.
No idea.
Yeah, and there is a fee charged to students.
We are summer program in general, in fact, we got a meeting scheduled on Friday just to talk about all of that. So we don't generally break it down by class, but we're looking at, staffing and costs and those kind of things.
But there is a fee, though, charged for
For
summer.
health and PE, yes,
I paid it.
students and families are
Paid
charged for
quite
that.
a pretty penny, if I recall.
And I'll just add in, back in October, and I'm not going to remember the figures, and I didn't bring this with me, but I had questions about especially the supplementals and how those were reduced. And I ran the spreadsheets on the supplementals, and what was cut in the athletic department exceeded what was cut in the supplementals. Now, that doesn't get into teaching staff, but it was more equal than I expected when I ran the numbers.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. So we'll move to technology, maintenance, and transportation. So we'll follow a similar format that we used with our junior high and high school teams. So we have Jason Bloomer, who is our director of maintenance, and then we have James Mapus, who is our executive director of operations. So he's responsible for transportation, food service, and maintenance and grounds. So he oversees those. So the positions that fall into those areas that you'll see at the high school, 2 custodians, at the junior high, 1 custodian, and at the board office we have a district, or in the district, a district custodian, a grounds person, and then technology tier 1, technology tier 2, and mail carrier. So maybe just kind of walk us through about those positions and the impact. And you taught me a new word, trash and dash. So Mr. Bloomer, thank you for that. I know it's not great, but I'm sure that might come up in your conversations.
Yeah, thanks for having us here tonight to go over some of this. So some of the cuts that we have, obviously we have 2 at the high school. 1 would be a day shift, 1 will be a night shift position. At the junior high, we will have a night position. At HPI, we will have a night position. And then we have a district custodian that we were able to use between, and what that is they travel between Fort Meigs and Woodland. One of the things that we did is we looked at the size of the building, the number of students, activities, things like that. So they actually we're receiving 20 hours at each building to help with cleanup and things like that, to help the custodians just because of the size of the buildings. And then we actually had what we called as a district sub. It was a full-time position that would be eliminated as well. Then as in, I think the last slide was 1 grounds person that was being eliminated.
Hey, Mr. Bloomer, just help us, our custodial staff numbers per square footage, we were below the benchmark to begin with, is that correct?
Correct. So the average that you want to be around, and I have it here, is somewhere in the roughly the 19,000 to 24,000 average. We're already now going to be above that, which is a little concerning for us. And I think if we go to the slides further down and we get into the activities of things that we have in our buildings, and we're at, going back to 21-22, we have around 20 or 7,500 events in our buildings. The following year of 22-23, we went up to 8,500. Last year, we were at 9,500. And currently, right now, as of last week, we're at almost 7,000 events in our building. So thinking about that, when we get into basketball games and all the events going on and community use of what it takes for our custodians to keep up with that, it's challenging for them. And I have been working with the junior high, the high school, HPI, with the principals to sit down and try and fight through this, because unfortunately with our reductions, they have already hit us. James and I sat down with Mike Holyfield, our OPSI rep, because we had some retirements, we had resignations, which you can see on the board now. So we've already lost 5 of the 6 positions that are being eliminated. So our cuts are hitting us now. And we're just trying to keep up with everything. And I think the challenging part now is everybody's still pretty much functioning at 100%, and we've lost 15% of our staff already. And we're still trying to make everything happen. So kudos to them. I know they're struggling through it, and we're trying to help them any way we can to get through this. So one of the big things we're looking at now is how do we function with all the events in our buildings? I mean, we're on pace to have over 10,000 events just this year. So that's one of the things that we're trying to kind of group together. I meet with our head custodians on a regular basis, and how that affects us. Yeah, that's just so far this year, and that was as of, I believe, December 6th. So there's 7,000 outside events or inside events as far as what's going on in our buildings. And I think there's a pie chart that follows that kind of gives us a breakdown of what, I don't know if you have that. Did you have that on there,
And while I
Mr.
pull that
Hassler?
up, the question about substitutes too, I know we're changing the process in terms of securing a sub when someone calls off. And then just how is the sub pool while I kind of advanced to that slide?
So what we have is with our Red Rover, which is our absenteeism, with our sub list. So if somebody puts in for a sick day or a vacation day, we have our sub list that can pick those up. That's another thing that's going to be eliminated is our subs. With the cost of what we looked at of what it costs for us to have those subs, it was either cut the subs or keep a full-time position. And we felt we wanted to keep a full-time position to keep somebody employed. So with looking at that, our sub pool is about 5-6 people. We actually tried to get a couple more filled, and this was before the levy. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. So we're sitting at about 5 or 6 people, and it's up to them when they want to fill that position, similar to, I believe, our teaching subs. That, if they want to pick up a day, they can. And one of our subs that's actually here tonight, he's, I want to say he's in early 80s, that is still working. And I appreciate Jim filling in, and he still fills in quite a bit and does a great job for us. So it's hard. It's hard for them of what we have to do to keep up with all of our building activities.
So the chart that is here, Jason and James did a great job of pulling data. So every time there is an after-school event, weekend event, they're able to go into our system and kind of extract it and say, okay, here are the activities. And you can see that, and tonight's a great example. I had somebody say, boy, I saw all the cars in the parking lot and I thought the room would be packed. Well, the building is packed because we have junior jackets practicing across the hall. We have Perrysburg Musical Theater that is down the other end of the building. And that is playing out in every one of our buildings. And for years, we have made a commitment, and I appreciate the board allowing us to do this, to be good partners to the community. So not only are we talking about opportunities that we're providing our own students, but we've opened up our buildings. None of these groups are being charged for their activities this evening. So that kids can participate. We have a custodian here, we have a custodian in other buildings. They're able to kind of keep an eye on things, check the bathrooms, after. It's additional work for them. But that's something what we've been able to do. And what's happening now with the reduction of custodians, the lack of subs, the inability to have those subs at a meaningful way, 34% of the activities that are happening in the district are community groups that are not school district sponsored events. And so that creates a real challenge as you're hearing from Jason about how do we do that. 4% of that 34% are charged. Because again, we like the fact that there are kids across the hall participating in these activities. But we are now at a point with the funding level that we have to hire staff to do these things, it is challenging to maintain.
Yeah, and one of the things that we used to have when I got here is we had a custodian at the junior high and the high school that worked Tuesday through Saturday. And one of the things for the Saturday that we had was to help out with athletic events or community use, things like that, so they weren't being charged. Unfortunately, now with the reductions that we're having, we've already switched the junior high, I believe it was last year, that it went to a Monday through Friday just because we couldn't keep up. I mean, we're losing that one person on Monday night of cleaning our building. So we had to switch that, and then we just recently switched with all the reductions of the custodians, the high school. So now that position that was Tuesday through Saturday is now Monday through Friday, just so we can keep up with cleaning the classrooms, keeping them safe, keeping them disinfected, things like that for the staff and for the students. And that's our number one thing, is for their safety and for their well-being. And that's what we're trying to do. And so it's just hard when you look at this and you think about, close to 10,000 events that are happening in our buildings, and 3,500 of them are community use. So that's just, something that we have to take a look at.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that concern right there about the community use and the impact on what your guys, what your folks need to get done on a daily basis. Also, as an aside, I was here late talking with Mr. Hostler and ran into Jim, who was here still doing his duty, and he is a great guy to talk to. But I do have a question here, though. So you had mentioned, the primary mission for your folks is to keep the classroom experience clean and safe. And with these cuts, with losing custodians, what are your concerns about the experience and what's going to have to happen within the classroom?
I think as far as the classrooms, I mean, the hard part is losing our subs. So we sit there and we focus on just the reductions that we lost of one custodian at night at the high school, but we have to take in, they take vacation time. They have to call in sick. So that one person now turns into maybe 2 or 3. So we have to focus on what we have to do, and our biggest thing is to make sure that the classrooms are taken care of. And like I said, we've been working with Mr. Cookson, meeting with him of different things we can do as far as the teachers, of what they can do to help us, make sure that we make that experience for them, for the students when they come in, that their desks are clean, that the floors are clean. So it's just a challenge for them, and we're doing everything, which I think we can. I think the biggest thing is that we have to look at, with our events in the building, especially the high school, where I know last night they had a basketball game. The girls were playing. Tonight the boys are playing. Typically we would go down after the games, we clean the gym, get the bleachers all put away for class the next day. Well, now we're at the point now with already having reductions that the bleachers are staying out. We just don't have the time to go clean, you know, after we clean those bleachers, to put them all back away, then the next day to get them all back out. So, you know, working with, you know, athletics, and we've met with Mr. Jaco and different things, and he spoke with the coaches of things are just going to have to change of how we operate.
Thank you.
I just want to say too, one of the things that we've noticed this year that we've never had before is where we've kind of had to insert ourselves and voluntold someone like, hey, there's a Sunday event, someone has to pick it up. And it's hard when they look at you and they're like, we're just tired of picking it up. Like, we're just burned out. And we get it, you know, it's hard on their bodies. They're cleaning all week. They picked up extra rooms. They're trying to get those rooms clean. They're trying to get events cleaned up. And then now there's a Sunday event and they're like, I don't want to work it. And excuse me, so that has been a challenge as well. We've been getting pushback on that. And in my 8 years here, I've never gotten pushback on that. But we always get it figured out and they do it. But, you know, obviously it's one of the things that we are hearing from them.
So one of the things that, as we're talking about this, so you've heard about just the ability to cover the ground, you know, when groups are here, the ability to have subs and vacation days and things like that and be able to fill those and just absorbing that extra work. We're losing subs, we're losing staff. And so, you know, there's a sustainability question that has come up from our staff saying, you know, how can we sustain what we're doing? And I think that is a legitimate question. And you know, here, you know, we began to try to find that balance between doing what we can for our staff, but also doing what we can for the community. The fact that we have that many events, and again, if we have somebody here that can unlock the door for them, we don't charge them. So we've been great partners to the community, but what we're hearing from our staff is this isn't sustainable. So what is the right balance? And I think that's something that we'd like to bring back to the board is we need to strike that balance. Pulling the rug out and saying, no community events, I think is not the right balance. But continuing to ask our staff to do what has been described, and having our buildings with those events rolling until 9:30, I don't think that that's the right balance either. So we're working hard to come up with something that we can share with the board to say, you know, unfortunately, we're going to have to sit down with these groups and say, you know, this is what we can do for you, and share that with you. But I think it's important to hear the reason and the why behind that. So the cuts are impactful in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and one of the things that we looked at is, and I know we talk about inflation and things like that, but the 2021-22 school year, we spent $103,000 in custodial supplies. In the 23-24, and I know there was an increase in outside events or events in our building, but we were up to $158,000 in custodial supplies. So, and I know some of that is inflation, but the more events we have, the more cleaning we have to do, so the more cost it is on us. So just something else to think about when we look at this.
So, Mr. Mapes, do you have, or Mr. Bloomer, whoever can answer this, do you, like, what's the average number of hours our custodial staff is working? I mean, you're right, we can't keep up at that pace. Nobody can. But if you don't have subs and somebody's on vacation, then we don't have anybody to clean the building. I mean, what is our average hours?
I mean, they're still working their 40 hours, but the overtime for events and things like that, it goes on a seniority basis. So not every person has to take an event. So if there's 5 of us in order and I'm at the top of the list and say, hey, we got a basketball game on Saturday, I can say, no, I can't work that. And then it goes to the next person. So some of the I work here and there, and some of the other ones are picking up more overtime and working those long hours, and that's where we're hearing it like, I can't keep doing this.
Right. What happens when nobody wants to pick up an event?
Then we have to go, so.
Force overtime.
Yeah, we can't force it. The one thing we can do is open it up to other district custodians. So even though they may be, we have 10 nighttime custodians at the high school, if there's a Saturday event, say, let's just say nobody picks it up, we can put it out to the other custodians at the other schools if anybody wants to pick it up. The hard part is we have building codes, access, where's everything at, a set of keys, all that stuff. So then it just gets harder and harder to make that happen. But like Mr. Mapes said, one way or another, we make it happen. And it's just, it's taxing on them at this point.
Thank you.
I think that one of the things that you heard, and Jason, thanks for the information, and James, citing the amount of supplies that we spent from 2021 to where we are today, because we charged our staff with turning over every rock to find where there could be savings. And there's only so much we can cut with paper and supplies and those kinds of things. And so we've asked, transportation, the same kind of question. Turn over every rock, what can we do to find those dollars that we can redirect to the classroom or other areas, or to hit that target. So one of the things that came back, and it wasn't shared on October 8th, but as they began to do their work and work on, finding those dollars, there was a tremendous opportunity for savings in terms of routing when it comes to our elementary and looking at our current configuration. So we wanted to share with you about a discussion about new elementary boundaries, because that is an area where I think there can be an opportunity for some additional cost savings that might help, put some more money into some of those other areas that Lori and Sue, that you talked about. So I know Brooke has been instrumental, and James, so I'll turn it over to them as we get into this conversation.
Yes. Again, we've been tasked with looking at where else can we be more efficient, what else can we do. The reality is we've lost operational funding. We've heard a lot from the community, long-term plan. That 8-year levy was the long-term plan to hopefully be able to, sustain our operations, as well as, hopefully then within that time period, hopefully be able to ask for a new elementary building. Unfortunately, that also did not pass, so we don't see that on the horizon anytime soon. And the reality is the way that we're growing, there is an imbalance in enrollment between our elementaries, and where the boundaries are currently drawn, it's not an efficient model right now. And what's been happening is we've actually been essentially quietly redistricting as new subdivisions have come online. And so typically, we'll get word a subdivision is being developed, it's approved for 46 lots. We know within that neighborhood, maybe it's slotted to, be in the Fort Meigs zone. That whole neighborhood will not fit in Fort Meigs School. So we are already having to divide neighborhoods or look at class sizes, class sections for new students that enroll and force transfer them to a spot where there's space. So that's already happening. And the reality is we're continuing to grow. That's not stopping regardless of not having that funding stream. So why now? Again, we're looking at where students are enrolled, and we're trying to achieve that balance between schools. Redistricting would also, of course, just increase efficiency of bus routes and walk zones. And again, evening out that enrollment between buildings. And we'll get to a slide to show you the differences and some of the things that causes. But also redistricting could also delay the need for another trailer. It can push that out a little bit longer. And so if we can push out, $500,000 to $1 million of costs further out, that certainly will help. Again, evening out the number of sections within a building, there's operational pieces to this that aren't necessarily realized on the surface. So, for example, part of this reduction plan at the elementary level is we're reducing library, we're reducing an encore section. So we're going down to 4, gym, PE, art, STEM. Well, a couple of our buildings have 6 sections of a grade level. In the past, we've been able to divide up 5 sections into 4 specials. Dividing 6 sections into 4 specials is going to be problematic. And right now, where we have those imbalances in enrollment, that's what happens. And so, additionally, each building still only has 1 dean, 1 health aide, a limited amount of staff. And so, from an operational standpoint, just a workload standpoint, what can we sustain? So piece to the staffing levels with redistricting, as well as, of course, like the space issue. So if the district decides this is something, or the board decides this is something we should consider and pursue, what is look to January, early February, really fine tune some details of what that would look like and what it would do to enrollment size, reduction of routes, all those types of things, the cost, basically essentially like the benefit and the cost, comparing those 2 things. And we would present those options to the community. We would hold meetings at elementary buildings and then a general meeting to gather that feedback. And we would collect data, we do some surveys. And then the idea would be that we could present at the February board meeting options to the board based on the feedback collected and have a recommended top option for consideration. We would like to have these plans in place by March. March is typically when kindergarten registration is in February, but March is typically where we place students. And so, of course, we would want to notify families of those changes that would be coming as well. So, you can see the differences in enrollment now. Woodland has 179 or 180 more students than Toth. And you can see those building capacities. The buildings with the asterisks already have trailers. But really, we want to look to how can we maybe even out enrollment closer to around a 500 average per building versus that imbalance. That gives us a little more breathing room. And it also delays the forced transferring that will have to happen. So if we don't do anything, what's going to happen is Fort Meigs and Woodland will be well over capacity. A new student will move into that area. We're going to have to force transfer them to the building with room. And that's not going to be efficient in any way, shape, or form, and is going to be problematic as we continue to grow. So this this is our current routes, and you can see the overlapping and the inefficiency that's happening with the way we've currently been growing. And again, I want to kind of go back to reiterate, the original plan was to be able to secure funding for a new elementary, build that elementary, and redistrict 1 time at that time. So that was the long-term plan. That's obviously not happening now, which is why we're bringing this as a consideration to the board. So you can see there's a lot of overlap, and here's some closer up pictures of just, you have 4 buses essentially going into, down one street to pick up students because that's what's having to happen now. Issues with our current routes, it's expensive because we are having to send several buses into the same neighborhood because of some of the spacing issues. There's a lot of overlap, a lot longer routes. There are students that drive by 3 elementaries to get to their own elementary currently with the way that the boundaries are. We're also having to divide, as I mentioned before, having to divide neighborhoods. So right now there are already divided neighborhoods due to the growth. And again, that imbalance of enrollment. We're also limited in our walk zones with the way the boundaries are drawn, and so this could give us the ability to rethink some of that as well. So this is just a sample. This is a sample with the software that we have within transportation where we can plug in information and it can redraw boundaries based on efficiency. So this is just a sample, and you can see the difference of how all the colors are kind of grouped together, obviously meaning it would be more efficient that way versus the previous slide where you saw a lot of overlap. And so again, this is a sample. One of the things that we will have to do is it's that balance of efficiency with routes, but also density, and you have to consider enrollment size for where all the students are living and what buildings they would go to. But this consolidated routing, Tom, if you want to scroll ahead, we could possibly reduce about 5 routes just based on preliminary data. Again, increased walk zones requiring less busing as well, may even be able to eliminate some potential crossing guard locations, because right now we have to post them at some pretty busy streets. We may be able to change that. Approximate annual savings by just the 5 route reduction would be an estimated $100,000 per year. And that's just the route. And again, it would reduce the volume of buses on the freeway, the way that we would look at redrawing the boundaries. And again, it delays that forced transfer of new students, which is super inefficient to do when you're routing. And we would be able then to keep kids in the same neighborhoods going to the same building instead of having this divided neighborhood situation that we have now. So considerations moving forward. One of the things we have to consider is the anticipated growth and where those areas will be assigned. And we have a slide that kind of shows you what's coming online here in the near future. We also have to consider just equity. We need to look at socioeconomic status and make sure we're taking that into account when we're redrawing our boundary lines, particularly concerning like Title I funding. We also want to look at the number of students impacted. So that we're putting together, we will drill down to every student on that street that might have a change, so we really know how many students are impacted. Along with that, though, I will kind of caution the board. I really think if this is something we do pursue, we are going to need to consider pausing interdistrict transfers, because we will have a lot of people that, of course, want to remain in their current building. And I think that's going to be a real challenge and may defeat the purpose of redistricting with that. So I just think that needs to be kind of out there. I know it's an unpopular, popular thing to say, but I think that needs to be something we're going to have to really wrestle with. I know that will be hard for some families, but again, I think it won't work if we approve, interdistrict transfers if we make this change. Unfortunately, unlike redistricting, when we have a new school, this is really being driven by a lack of funds. We need to do something different. That $13.5 million is a reality. And this is a way to, one, alleviate some of the financial strain, but also give us space for a longer amount of time, because we won't have a new building coming anytime soon. We'd also need to look at possibly some policy changes around walk zones as well. So these are areas already approved for developing in the community that are still under development. So you can see there are several here, and this is where they're currently slotted to attend. But we just got an email, I think last Monday, 46 homes, was it Coventry Point? 46 additional lots, and then 19, forget which one. But we're continually kind of have a spreadsheet and keeping track of the number of lots approved. And so this is kind of a sample of what is still currently under development now that we would want to take into consideration when we're looking at redrawing district boundaries, or potentially redrawing district boundaries. So again, we didn't talk about this in October. The goal was to secure operational funding and be able to hopefully pursue an elementary building, which is needed. We are still growing, but this is our reality, and so we think we should bring it to the board for at least a consideration. And if the board chooses to want to potentially pursue that, we would gather information, put those details together, share it at each elementary as well as with the board, and kind of go from there.
I just want to add to one of the things too with bus routes that we have to keep in mind is right now a lot of those bus routes are 3-tier bus routes, and so some of the buses have a hard time getting into the high school. I know that's one of the things Aaron has to deal with every day is some of the buses coming in late because of those 3-tiered, because we're trying to push in elementary and some of those other things because we don't have necessarily always the driver or the buses to do those things. So this would also help with that. The other thing that it would help with as well is some of our bus drivers are getting 4.25 or more hours. When you start staying in the same area, when you're pulling out of the school and you start dropping off within 2-3 minutes, that bus route's gonna go a lot quicker than when you drive for 20 minutes and then start dropping kids off. So you start reducing time of bus routes as well. All the bus drivers are a minimum of 4 hours. So typically we see between 4 and 4.25 for our 4-hour driver routes that are 4-hour routes. Sometimes they do go to a quarter. But some of our elementary routes really push into, especially the Woodland routes and some of the Frank routes now that are expanding out. We do see where some of those routes are, 5.5 hours. And so those would be reduced as well. So not only would we lose those five bus routes, but other bus routes also would be consolidated as well.
Can you explain the three-tier busing for
Sure.
people that
So
don't understand?
we have buses that do in the AM, they do 3 segments, and in the PM, they do 3 segments. So we'll have a bus that goes out and does an HPI or junior high route, and then they'll go pick up high school kids, and then they go grab an elementary route. So that's what their morning looks like. And then in the afternoon, what they're doing is they're going to either Hall Prairie or junior high as their first route, and then they will go to it depends on where the route ends. They could go to an elementary first and run them home real quick and then go to the high school, or they could go to the high school and then go pick up elementary kids.
Are we discussing tonight the building usage and the rebounding of the elementary, or is this is information?
So this is information. I mean, certainly the board can discuss the reaction. You're hearing it for the first time. So however you'd like to proceed with that discussion. And
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking that as well, because I've certainly heard kind of a ask for a direction on this particular instance, this issue. But I do think looking at understanding the amount of materials we have to cover, still, I think it's important to hear that information, ask clarifying questions tonight, to come back Monday to be prepared for a little more robust discussion. And I think some of the things that I'm already thinking that I know we'll want to discuss are the 2 you just mentioned right there. So that'd be my suggestion. Okay, and I'm getting the high sense. So we're going to take I'm going to keep it a tight 10-minute break here. We will re-adjourn at 8:05.
At 8:05?
No, Mike Gamble, 8:05. Okay, thank you for that break. It is 8:07, and we will keep moving through board office and district. I believe Mr. Hostler is next.
So next, we will touch base on the board office. And so these are certain positions that are district-wide and connected to this this building and also district-wide. So turn it over to Mr. Christie, and I know Mr. Swartz-Miller is up next and can jump in if needed, but.
When you look at the board office and those district positions, as you can see, we put that because most of those positions operate out of this office or out of this building. But even though some of them are most of the times out in the buildings, they're headquartered here, and then they're out off of there. So, and you can take a look at that with that development office secretary, that being out of Jeff Abke's office. With that position being reduced. We also have a district-wide mail carrier that basically goes between all the different buildings throughout the day, delivering and providing that service. We will have to look and see how we can do that differently with, even if I'm going out to the high school for a meeting, delivering and getting things delivered in that way as well. But
And there's also
the financial, the money aspect of it. Yeah.
A person also moves all the money from the buildings to the bank.
And also, they're responsible for delivering the books to HPI. So our relationship with Way Library, that is the person that brings the books back and forth. So
it's not just a mail carrier, right?
Yep.
They have we have a safe in the van because they pick up all the deposits from the buildings and take them to the bank, which obviously will no longer happen.
So how will that happen then?
Well, before we had the courier position, the building secretaries did it.
We'll have to revert back to that, where the secretaries are making deliveries to the bank for any deposits that come into the buildings.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, Tom, are you saying that we're not going to do the Way Library book delivery or book thing? I don't know what it's called.
What I'm saying is that person's responsible for that, and right now we don't know yet how we are going to replicate that, or because it's a little more involved than having a secretary go to the bank. Transporting the books back and forth is a different proposition, so that will be a challenge they'll have to work through, and I don't know what the answer is yet.
Yeah, there's going to be some challenges there. I mean, simple things, because sometimes we're in session, the banks aren't. That money legally cannot sit in the buildings. It'll have to come back to the central office, and we'll lock it up in my safe. So there's some other challenges that we'll have to work through.
Yeah. So I was going to talk next on that central office receptionist position. It's played a critical role. Anytime somebody is coming in here to the central office, they buzz in, and then that person is there to bring them in. Give them their ID, notify whatever area that they're going to have that meeting, and then typically we would walk down to that office to get that person to come to our office off of that. So they also do a lot with the Stinger passes and processing those for all of our senior citizens who are using those and picking those up, and just do a lot of general duties. It comes under the HR office umbrella, but that person not only does things for the HR office, they do things for many departments, even our teaching and learning department, even the treasurer's office. So it's kind of a person that's in multiple areas and impacts quite a few areas within the central office operation. And so looking how we're going to readjust and do that differently, where people would be able to come in, buzz into, and get into the vestibule area, and then we would be having to go down and meet that person there. And so if I have somebody that's coming in, I need to be out there to meet that person. There would be a call system that they would be able to do, basically pressing a button, was that what you'd say, Brooke, off of there? And being able to get that attention to be able to do that. We currently have that person also right now. It handles all of our, what we call our Red Rover, our absence management system for all of our teachers. We centralized that in one location, and previously it was out to all the buildings, and the building secretaries were responsible for that. It's very helpful to have that centralized because in the mornings, she gets here very early to be able to help fill positions that have not been picked up yet. And so she's getting those out to other subs. And I think it's really one of the main reasons why our substitute teacher fill rate is very, very high in comparison to other school districts because of that role of that person being able to do that. So again, that will be pushed back to the buildings as well to handle that process with that too. So there's a lot of pieces to that position that will just be, pushed out to different areas and to different people as well.
Well, I remember Ara being so concerned about security, and that was one of the things for that position. How will security for y'all be affected by the loss of that?
Yeah, they will not be able to get out of that vestibule area until somebody is going down to get them. Yeah, they're trapped, in a sense, they're trapped there because those doors, you won't be able to open those from the inside in that vestibule area.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's good.
Yeah.
The development office secretary, I know that was something that the board, heard presentations about, adding that support in development. So it's one of the main departments here that works hard to bring in funding for the district. And as you increase, Jeff Abke made a presentation to the board. A lot of the research and data that we have, a lot of the research and data that we have shows that when you have more staff in that realm, the possibility to raise more money is what happens. So just to give you some things with that position going away, but we went from 1,722 donors in 2019. Last year, we had 3,132 donors. So that office is getting more donations, more donors that are cycling through, so that support goes towards that. So that was part one of that fruition. Having additional staff means additional touches. The other piece of it was it allowed our development director to go out and spend more time on the road engaging with prospects, larger donors. So in that respect, in 2020, 2021, we had 23 donors who made $1,000 or more gift to the district. And in 2024, this last 23-24, we had 40 donors that made over $1,000 gift to the district and foundation. So, so that loss, is certainly going to put limitations as to how, who does that work now. So we have a development director who is spending more time engaging with donors, is going to spend more time having to do, some of those kind of clerical things because there will be nobody there to do that. So that isn't, another impact with that. And in the assistant treasurer position with, all the transactions that I just mentioned in the development office, those certainly have increased in Randy's department as well.
Yeah, and the assistant treasurer is going to create some, not having, it's going to create some issues in terms of segregation of duties because, for example, I can't take those duties, some of them, because of segregation of duties. There's going to have to be spread out over other people, and there's going to be some responsiveness issue on some things. We're not going to be able to as quickly respond on some things, but it's going to be a challenge everywhere. And my main concern is still being able to stay compliant. For example, the credit card program, by law, I cannot be the compliance officer. So it has to be someone, it can be subordinate to me, but it can't be me. And so we'll have to figure some things out like that.
So we do have a hiring freeze for next school year. So I think that's important for us to to keep in mind that with the incremental levy, we had an increase each year in the amount of funds that we were collecting. so that we could keep up with growth. You saw the previous slide about all the developments that are underway. And so we were very fortunate to have that incremental levy that gave us the funds at the moment that we needed it in terms of staff. So without that, we don't have any additional revenue coming into the district. So
I need to add there too, if you recall, when the bond issue failed, we were adding about $1 million in new staff a year, and that was built into the forecast. Well, then we go, okay, we're gonna have to add portables. So we reduced that forecast about $500,000 a year for new staff. Now for next year, that number is 0. Now we have some money built in the future years, but it's, $225,000, $250,000, because we're still gonna grow, and we still got class size issues, and we still have special education compliance that we're gonna have to keep up with. Sorry to interrupt, Tom.
yeah, and that's it. So we're very limited in terms of what we can do moving forward.
Tom, can I add to that as well? And that Tom mentioned earlier too, that when a position becomes open either through retirement or somebody else leaving the district, that we are going to review every one of those positions and say, do we need to fill it? And then I'm having conversations with all those with the building administrators saying, okay, what's the enrollment? What can we do? Can we, not fill that and get the feedback from them and then go from there off of that. So, we also have to realize that we are having some retirements that are coming through with the STRS lowering it down to 33 years. We've had a couple come through. We still have some that we're waiting to see if we're going to get additional ones. But we again have to look at that whole picture and if that position has to be filled or not off of there. So I still am in a constant state of recruitment because we never know from year to year whether some elementary teachers or this teacher may leave or their husband gets transferred or what life happens that causes positions to come open as well. So we always have to be ready to, for those situations too. So, and then with the salary freezes there for administrators and our exempted staff, right now we're seeing that competitive wage piece right before our eyes. Jason's what he's experienced with Rossford, losing some of his staff that can make $2 an hour more going to Rossford as a custodian. So we're seeing that, that competitive part because we're very competitive with when I go to other conferences with HR directors from Northwest Ohio. I mean, we all are checking each other to see, who's getting who's paying what. And everybody's always looking for that edge, just as you are in coaching of, to get that team to be the best they can be and who can recruit for you as well. So those are those issues that'll be brought before us.
There's two unions that represent the majority of staff here in the district that are employed. There is a group of employees that are not represented by the union, the administrators and exempted staff. So we have a salary wage freeze for administrators, exempted staff, and so that'll be taking effect, beginning next year. So, and Mr. Christie, there's a couple of things, committees that showed up that people had questions about in terms of, why are those still there?
Right. The first there is the Local Professional Development Committee, which is called the LPDC. The state of Ohio and Ohio Revised Code requires a district to have an LPDC in the district. And the purpose of that is main thing is licensure and making sure the staff are keeping up with the requirements they need to do to renew their license. And they, over that 5-year time frame of making sure that they are on pace to do that. And so Paula Stout in my office, the HR office handles all those. She is reaching out to staff. That committee, we meet once a month to review requests, to review what people are doing and making sure that they are getting those things approved. But we're required by law to have that. And so that's why that has to be there. The second part is also, and it comes really out of Brent's office, the teaching and learning, the resident educator mentors. We're required again by law to provide our new teachers resident educator mentors. And that has to be within their first 2 years. And so that's why those have to be there as well. The professional development chair is part of our teacher contract. And there's a sum of money that's dedicated for professional development for our staff. And so that person manages that committee, and they review when those professional development requests come in and make decisions on whether that applies to what we call their individual professional development plan. A lot of them call it their IPI-DIP off of that. They have to, when they're doing professional development, it needs to be related to the goals that are in their plan. And so that person chairs that committee to be able to use those dollars. And again, it has to be there for that.
Mr. Christie, can you explain to the community and, so what resident educator is? I mean, educators know, but what do community members who...
You want to do that?
I mean, I can explain it, but...
And we can kind of transition to Brent's area as well.
So the resident educator program used to be a 4-year program for those new to our profession. After 4 years, they could apply for an official license, not they call it a trial license, provisional. And so it was reduced to 2 years a few years back. We have done a pretty good job here in Perrysburg supporting our new staff members through the process. And so I'll actually talk about resident educator a little bit on slide 74. Just to give you a heads up, my message was more fluid a couple hours ago. Being slide 70 found me making a lot of notes or crossing things out to avoid some redundancy, so I apologize in advance. Our teaching and learning...
This is Brent Schwartzmiller, our Director of Teaching and Learning, so sorry. So thanks, Brent.
So our department's mission is really rooted in ensuring equitable and high-quality instruction for all students. That entails wanting all of our students to meet grade level expectations, exceed their personal best, and prepare for future aspirations. Navigating that requires addressing a host of complexities and challenges. Each is unique as the 6,200 students and staff members that we serve. And so with that in mind, I just wanted to sort of lead with that and share that we identify curricular review as a sort of a foundational practice for us, for our instructional work. Through this process, we're developing common curricular maps to ensure consistency and equity. The maps serve as pacing guides, but also a shared vision for success. They enable us to uphold the same standards for every student, regardless of teacher. This work extends beyond curriculum. At our latest TNL board committee meeting, I shared a document why curriculum maps are so essential. They're foundational in that they impact every other initiative that we do, whether it's multi-tiered systems of support, closing gaps identified in our one plan, assessment development, grading practices, inclusive practices, supporting co-teaching, data-informed decisions, resource allocation, teacher evaluations, all are impacted by curricular review. I share that because teacher on special assignments listed, and I want to start by sharing what our current teachers on special assignment are doing and sort of the impact of not filling that position. So as you know, last year the state came out with a wonderful mandate regarding English language arts curriculum. We have 2 teachers dedicated to supporting that implementation currently. The implementation of foundations in grades K through 3 and the implementation of wit and wisdom in K6. And this impacts approximately 120 or so teachers. This lift in implementation is immense. It would have been immense in a smaller district. It's immense in a district our size. I compare it to turning a ship. We do so cautiously and realistically. And without the support of these individuals, instruction would vary greatly, and it would just be undesirable for our students overall. The other thing I'd add with these two individuals is they also provide training in science of reading and in reading intervention strategies. Without them, we would have to pay out-of-district people or trainers to come to us. And so they do provide for us some cost-saving measures just because they're able to do the trainings we need. We have 2 additional teachers on special assignment doing curricular review. They are currently working with 12 different curricular review groups. 4 of those groups are in stage 3, which is implementation, which is where we want it to be. This finds them working with 70 teachers on those review teams, but also that would impact about 120 so teachers in those curricular areas as well. These individuals are also highly involved in Schoology support, data analysis, instructional coaching, and support in specific areas like STEM and the fine arts. One of the things that was sort of highlighted during our COVID experience were a couple jumped out. One were the gaps in achievement between our highest learners and our most needy and struggling learners. And the gaps widened over that period. When I say widened, I mean our performance based on our all student average versus for example, our students with disability. It widened our performance. And the other thing that was most notable is just the variance of instruction. So the variance from teacher to teacher in specific grade levels, and our need to make sure that we are in line with what we value and what we want in terms of our instruction at each grade level, each subject area. So when we set out to look at curricular review and make sure that we have a curriculum that is agreed upon and consistent, we looked at about 29 different curricular areas across 360 or so teachers. So the decision to not fill the teacher on special assignment delays some work in some curricular areas that we haven't been able to tackle as of yet. We certainly understand the decision and will continue to work and continue the progress in the areas that are already in the curricular review process and support the areas that have not yet made that jump. We have made considerable ground in that in those 29 originally identified areas, we have 22 of those areas in the curricular review process. And so that is just tremendous for us. So that sort of addresses that teacher on special assignment slide. In terms of gifted, I know Mr. Bucher touched on this. This decision truly reflects attention of what we're required to do and what we aspire to do. As was shared, we're mandated to identify gifted students. Pull-out instruction with gifted licensed teachers is not a requirement. Transitioning to differentiated instruction within the gen ed classrooms is a necessary financial adjustment for us. I want to say the tension felt is partially in recognition and appreciation for the hard work given by our current gifted teachers. We're certainly grateful and do not want to miss the opportunity or understate the fact that we're so grateful for their hard work. What I will say is the shift can be supported in the fact that there are districts across the state producing high achievement, whether it's pull-out or whether it's differentiated in the gen ed classroom. With our curricular review process and targeted support, we're committed to ensuring to support that move into the gen ed classroom and help teachers adjust to the rigor and challenge with more students in their classrooms. So those are the gifted slides. There's two. And then the last slide highlights some broader reductions. Some of these responsibilities remain and now fall on existing personnel. Duties like data analysis, new teacher support, the resident educator program, tech integration and specialized training will just require our department to be creative, find creative solutions, and just collaborate additionally within our department and try to handle it. The other thing that I wanted to recognize, and the burden of a lot of the changes outlined tonight, some of that burden is placed on our building leaders. As instructional leaders in the buildings, our principals are tasked with fostering teacher growth and student success. Many of the responsibilities that you hear are being reallocated become more managerial tasks. And one of our department goals is to try to remain focused on providing clarity and support and resources to try to help lift some of that burden, so our building leaders can concentrate on being instructional leaders. So,
All right.
any questions from teaching and learning?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next we'll have our elementary principals and Mr. Best, HPI principal.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing us to be here to speak with you tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Bryant, principal at Frank Elementary.
Sorry.
So, no.
Like Mr. Swartzmiller was speaking about, we will be losing all of our gifted teachers. As elementary principals, when we were making this decision, we were looking at what is mandated by the state and what is not mandated by the state. And although we do value what our gifted teachers offer our gifted students, gifted services are not mandated by the state. Gifted teachers are able to provide students a faster pace with the curriculum and a deeper, more complex content, and the students will feel the loss of not having those services. Those students will be pushed back into the gen ed classrooms for those for their content. And this will impact not only our gifted students, but also the other students in the classroom, because the teachers that would have the gifted students receiving services in a different classroom would have learners with diverse needs, in a smaller band. Now with the gifted students in the classroom, they'll have a much bigger band of diverse learners, which reduces the individualized attention and support that each student is able to receive.
On our list, which none of these cuts are ideal, but we are responding to the community's vote and the need to make these hard decisions. We have classroom teachers on the list, 2, and 1 intervention specialist. You've heard the redistricting, rebounding proposal earlier. Doing that will equal out some of the buildings, which is one of the reasons that we would be able to do this. We looked at enrollment numbers, class sizes. It's inevitable that class sizes will be impacted when we're trying to take away $13.5 million from the budget. So while it's heavy to offer up as a cut, these are the decisions that we're being asked to make.
Thank you, Ms. Molina, principal at Toth Elementary. Dr. Salowitz, principal at Woodland Elementary.
There you go, got it in first.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the assistant librarians and kind of the impact that'll be on each of the buildings. It's really a place where reading comes alive. It's a place where kids can kind of discover their love of reading for reading's sake, a place where great literature can be discovered, hobbies and interests can be discovered. And research skills honed, and it's just a place that really supplements all the other learning that's happening in the building. And it would be a great loss for us. I think also from a logistics standpoint, Woodland has 2 grade levels that has 6 sections. Losing the assistant librarian will bring us down to 4 encore, and I know Mrs. Price has mentioned this. It will push our encore classes to about 36 to 38 students in certain grade levels. Just by pulling that out. So it'll be 6 classrooms divided into 4 classes. And so that right now, I mean, we've been able to really minimize the amount of splitting that's been done and really kind of limit the amount of students in each class. But the possibility next year will be like that 36 to 38 range.
Michael just mentioned Encore, and just to share that those are our specials, so art, music, STEM, library, PE. We also have custodian on our list. Mr. Bloomer has already spoken about that. We feel the cuts already at the elementary level. Jason feels that we feel the cuts through conversations. It's just a reality that we have to live now with the cuts, and what that looks like at the student and the teacher level is, we're putting trash out in the hallways to make it easier for the custodians. Of course, we always ask our students to clean up after each other, which they do a great job at. But that certainly felt within our buildings, our aging buildings.
Before you shift over to HPI, can you just clarify for me, because I'm not well-versed in elementary schools anymore, because they're called assistant librarians, but you're saying that library will no longer be an encore option. Can you clarify the 3 and how the assistant piece fits into that?
Okay, so I'm gonna, some of it's history, I think that predates me. I believe that they are assistant librarians assisting the main librarian at the junior high school. And so I think that's in classification. In terms of 3 of them, based upon enrollment growth over the last few years, a few years ago we had 2, and they were shared. So ours was at Woodland was shared with Toth and Frank and Fort Meigs. Based upon the number of sections and growth over the last few years, Woodland and Woodland and Fort Meigs have their own, and now Toth and Frank share. Assistant librarians, though, still are operating their own library in the school on an everyday basis, though.
It doesn't mean that there's a librarian still in your building because the assistant is gone.
No, they are assisting the one at the junior high school.
Library will not be offered at the elementary next year.
Thank you.
Scott Best, I'm the principal at Hall Prairie.
You guys are so cute. Boy, girl, just fits right in with your level there.
So thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'm going to start with our building secretary position. As you know, our secretaries are the gatekeepers. They're the ones that set the tone. They're the ones that greet our parents and the students each morning. I know I personally rely on our secretaries to do a lot of things. Everything from calling somebody down to the office to setting up a meeting. We're going to reduce our secretarial staff from 3 to 2. To put this in perspective, we currently have 930 students. Woodland, the next highest, or the highest elementary, has 580. So we're going to have 2 people doing the same job for 450 extra families that, in our building. So it's really going to slow down our response time. And it's really going to have a big impact on how we operate next year in the office. Jason's talked about the custodian positions. Just to give you an example there, 2 weeks ago, we had the Toledo Symphony, Youth Symphony Orchestra in our building. At the same time, we had Junior Jackets. We had several hundred people in the building until about 9:30, and our custodial crew couldn't clean half the building until they left, which gave them about an hour, hour and a half to finish up. So, the custodians have a big impact on our daily operations. I'm going to skip real quick to the study hall monitors. We currently have 2 full-time monitors and 2 part-time monitors. We currently have the 2 big classes, so we have the bubble coming up through the school. The loss of those positions will increase every math, ELA, science, and social studies class by 4 to 6 students, every single class, with the elimination of those positions. With the gifted ELA positions, Scott talked a little bit about that, up at the junior high and the elementary folks. At our building, that will impact about 200 students next year, the loss of those 2 positions that will be going back into our gen ed classes. Every single one of our 6th grade ELA classes will be at 30. That will be the average. It also impacts, how we instruct. Just like, the elementary buildings, we're working through a new curriculum. And the differentiation piece is going to be huge. The intervention specialist positions, one of those positions is our behavior specialist position that works with some of our neediest and most diverse learners. The other position is one of our team positions. We currently have 1 IS per team, and losing that 1 extra person is going to really consolidate or condense where our students with special needs are placed. So there's going to be a higher concentration on at least 7 of the teams. And then, our lunchroom monitor, right now we have 3 monitors. We have, for example, in 6th grade, we have about 240 kids eating lunch at one time. So that will go down to 2. So that's going to be a big stretch as well. What's not on our list up there, Tom mentioned the courier, the mail courier that picks up our books from my library. That's going to be a big adjustment. We've been working with Scott and Aaron with the music folks so that we can continue to offer that at our building. So that really is going to impact our school day.
So these are some of the activities and clubs that are involved. So we'll kind of just talk through those a little bit.
All right, at the elementary, we offer student council and safety patrol. Those are some leadership opportunities that we give to our upper elementary kiddos. We have a yearbook that is, captures the year for memories for those kiddos. We do some showcasing of an art show. And of course, our students enjoy taking their field trips. And then each building has some different clubs that they offer. Running club, game club, what are some of the other clubs? I can't even think. STEM club. So those are after-school activities that students in a variety of different grade levels can sign up to participate and just find something that fits, what their interests are. You want to talk about your clubs?
So I think one of the things that has made Hall Prairie unique since we opened is the ability to put our kids in leadership positions. One club I want to highlight, Turtle Protectors. Back in January 2019, right before COVID hit, we had a group of students present to the school board a club they wanted to create and use our 3D printers. Over the years, that club has been maintained by our students. In fact, I bought 3 little trinkets yesterday to help save the turtles. But some other things up there, you can see band, orchestra, and vocal music, even though we'll continue to offer those classes. We won't be able to hold concerts or performances. We have our art show, winter art show tonight, which is a great experience for our kids. We won't have those art shows anymore as well.
Can I clarify one thing, Scott? And just to clarify, like with when we talked about the junior high and high school reductions in those clubs and activities, all of the things on this list have a paid supplemental contract. So each building kind of has the ability to create different activities based on there's 5 supplemental contracts at an elementary level to create some of those clubs. HPI has a number of those, but the things you see on this list, they're after school hours, so a teacher's compensated to run those clubs and supervise those clubs and activities. But that's why they're on that reduction list, because those all factor into the overall amount of money that we need to reduce.
On the elementary slide, I think a couple more, speaking about activities, you'll see that all of our student activities and supplementals are cut. That's drastic, but that's the reality of where we're at. The student activities, the indirect student supports, they enrich classroom learning, they extend. They are vital for that enrichment, but when we're talking about $13.5 million in cuts, we have to look at the enrichment part and cut those first. So while they're all being cut, this allows us to preserve core curriculum instruction, state mandates. So I just wanted to speak to the fact that of why all of the elementary positions are cut.
So on this slide, you can see that we are eliminating our BLT, our building leadership team. The other buildings have talked about that. Just like the other levels, we rely on that group to provide a lot of extra leadership. I know I rely on that group to help provide some insight and get different viewpoints. So having that shared leadership opportunity gone is really going to impact the quality of our programming. You could see all of our activity coordinators, all our supplementals are gone, and just like Jessica shared, those all, they're incredibly important and give our students the opportunity to grow and show leadership. We just can't move forward when we talk about the $13.5 million that we have to cut.
Could you explain the band, orchestra, and vocal at the bottom there is crossed off? Does that just mean, is that a reflection of, in other words, we're not doing the performances, or does that have to do with the instruction?
So those are the supplementals for the after-hour performances.
Okay.
You want to go one more slide? Or
Yep, I was just showing that was the performances. But yeah, you're
Well,
good.
that's what I made it. I was making an assumption, and I wanted to be sure.
Yep.
Because I'm getting emails.
So one of the things that has really made Hall Prairie unique are some of the exploratory elective options that we've had over the years. It's been a big part of our STEAM program and our identity. You can see the list there at the bottom. Those are all the non-performing arts classes that we will be eliminating or suspending next year. A lot of those classes are a kid who might not thrive let's say in ELA or math, they go to these classes and that's their relief for the day. That's where they shine. And again, that's a large part of our identity. If you look at the third bullet point, without those classes, we can shorten the school day and help out with the busing, still maintain our common planning time. Originally, when we, Scott, Aaron, and I met with, Brooke and Don and Brent and a couple other folks, we were talking about a Hall Prairie schedule that ended at 2:10. In all honesty, if you end that at 2 p.m., you could create further savings, $9,000, $10,000, because we're required to have IEP meetings, ETR meetings, 504 meetings, and just shortening the day an extra 10 minutes or 45 total. We don't have to get subs to conduct those meetings. We can have those meetings during the day without getting that additional support. Talked with Courtney about the shortened school day. I don't know the specifics, that's her world, but it seemed to really help, because it freed up our 17 drivers basically to get to the elementaries and the high school before their route started, which has been problematic for a while. So, yeah.
So to clarify, we eliminate all of those last bullets, construction 101, create, exploratory. There's nowhere for those kids to go, right? So you have 45 minutes of nothing for them unless you reduce the day. I mean, what would they do?
So right now we have each grade level has what we call an exploratory block. It's 45 minutes. So that's on the teacher side, that's how they get their second common planning period. On the kids side, they get to go to these classes. That's also when we offer band, choir, and strings. So hopefully I'm answering your question. You're correct. We don't have a place for them to go.
So then what, I mean.
They go home.
Right, that's what I mean. So you'd have to shorten your day. Can't give them 45 minutes of nobody overseeing them.
Yeah, essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. It's just, just that reaction, like all of this, like junior high and high school, there are some paths limited. Here, it's all taken away. I mean, I get it. It has to be, but this is sobering. This isn't even the right word. Thank you.
Yeah, to be honest, Hall Prairie won't look like Hall Prairie. It'll look like every other school.
And this is only $6 million worth of reductions. I can't even
then
comprehend what another $7.5 million worth of
Thank you, Sue.
reductions would look like.
I have the same thought.
Right. But then that's going to jeopardize your STEM designation as well, won't it?
Yeah. Thankfully, we did it last year. So we have our STEM designation for another 4 years. Now, we're still able to offer some STEM as part of our, the elementary's called Encore, those special classes, but it's nowhere near what we have now.
And Sue, one correction, it's not $7.5 million. I mean, if we have new money, potentially $7.5 million, but you're looking at $9 to $14 million.
With cost increases.
Well, just because we're talking about $20 million over 2 school years, right? It's not 13.5, that's 13.5 million in 1 year.
Yeah, that's where I was going, was if we weren't borrowing from the piggy bank, then, well, not borrowing, but taking from the piggy bank. So you said a couple of things that really, and I bet you Lori went through it too, that is hitting me hard as a teacher, as well as this bringing our gifted students back into the general classroom and the differentiated, why can't I say that word? Differentiated education that these teachers are now going to have to be planning for. And it reminds me of a mom who has to make either dinner for this student, or this kid now because they've got to go to this practice, and dinner for husband because he's coming home but he's going somewhere, to all these different meals that they're going to have to make. And it's so similar to that type of a thing. And it is such a burden on our teachers that want to do everything for all of their students. And then you really took my breath away when you said 30 students on average, or at the least in an ELA classroom.
I was just gonna say that.
OMG. So in something like a class like that, which is just an enormous amount of work after school hours, can parents or volunteers help out with that at all?
So one thing to point out, in 6th grade next year, every academic class will average 30.
Everyone, not just ELA.
Every single math, ELA, science, social studies class.
Okay, question still stands. Is there any place for parent volunteers to help that burden?
Be honest, Sue, I don't know that answer. I don't know the answer.
And that's one of my biggest concerns. It's like our staff is already working at full capacity and cannot add one more thing to their plate. And unless you've been in a classroom trying to teach 32 kids, it's like herding cats. So now you have 32 kids you're trying to do the best you can for, with a variety of ability. I don't even have, I'm just,
Yeah.
I don't have the words.
Exactly.
Not
There
the
are no
professional
words
words
for
to
it.
come out of my mouth. Yeah, it's just, I
Hold it in,
mean, I was
Lori.
I was a 7th grade teacher teaching ELA. I had 28 kids, 29 kids. It's, we cannot, and what I'm afraid of is knowing our staff, that they're going to want to do it all, and they're going to keep taking it on and taking it on and taking it on because that's what they need to, that's what they want to do, because teachers are helpers. And they're going to burn out, and health, I mean, they can't do it. We cannot ask them to do it, and they're going to feel like they have to do it, and they're going to be guilted into it. And this is going to affect across the board, and I know this is probably not the time, but I mean, just when you talked about reducing a secretary, I mean, the response time our parents expect is like that. They're not going to have it. You're not going to be able, teachers are not going to be able to respond quickly to parent communications. They're not going to be getting that one-on-one personalized information about their kids. I mean, people do not understand how this ripple effect is going to happen across. It's not just, oh, well, we're not going to have 9th grade football. It's just unbelievable. This is just, it's gut-wrenching.
On that happy note.
All right, well, thank you all.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, thank you.
Now, this is the one that upsets me the most.
all right.
Do I get an introduction, or do I have to introduce myself, Mr. Hostler?
Dr.
You are
Foltz.
Dr. Andrea Glesser.
And Dr. Glesser with Pupil Services and Student Services.
Thank you.
After that,
As he mutters it.
You're right, yeah. Well, first I thought it'd be worth saying that I know Pupil Services is a little bit of a mystery, I think, to people within the community. So I like to say within a school district, Pupil Services is really the catalyst to ensure that we're living up to the idea that all means all. And our programming is complex and often very much intertwined with the law, so things can be laborious, and it takes a lot to work through what could seemingly be an individual case. So that being said, we're working with students with all different kinds of exceptionalities. So some of our most vulnerable and needy students. So whether we're working with students who are economically disadvantaged, students with autism, students with physical disabilities, students with ADHD, students with mental health concerns, it runs the gamut, and we are here to advocate for them on their behalf and make sure that we're in compliance with the law and doing the things that we need to do. So there's numerous programs that we oversee, and I think the first that we wanted to discuss, and I'll pass it over to Dr. Glesser, is our special education program.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I know you've been here a long time, so we appreciate you giving time to our department as well. Starting with special education, a lot of you probably know this, but in the world of special education, we're required to be compliant with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And what that says is that every student in public education is entitled to a free, appropriate public education. So I'm gonna date myself. I've been working in the special ed world in Perrysburg now in one capacity or another for over 20 years. And we have always gone above and beyond. We've operated from a best practices model. We've really provided individualized research-based instruction and intervention tailored to maximize each student's potential. We've been a destination district for our gen ed students, but even more so for our students with disabilities. I don't think a week goes by that I don't get an email from a family that says, hey, we're moving to the area. Can you give me a call and tell me about your special education programs? We've heard great things. So, you know, we've been innovative, we've been trailblazers, and I think when I think about shifting some of that, that's a really hard, I think, shift for me personally to wrap my mind around, because we've been a district that other districts call and say, tell us what you guys are doing, or how do you do this? We've been a model program, you know, for programs, for services. We've created a ton of programs for students with disabilities. And when you think about special education in Perrysburg, you think about exceptional, not appropriate. So we'll be shifting with a lot of the cuts that I'm going to talk about to more of a compliance-based model. And what that means, because we're required to meet the needs of students with disabilities, we 100% will continue to provide the services outlined in students' IEPs, but we'll be meeting those minimum requirements, you know, legally, procedurally, the going above and beyond. I can't remember who said it, if it was you, Dr. Reffer, about response time to parents. Our intervention specialists are extremely responsive to parents. They almost serve as, you know, service coordinators for them in a lot of ways. So I'm gonna kind of summarize some of the positions in the special ed side of our department that are getting cut, because I think they're all linked. So there'll be an intervention specialist at the high school, 2 at Hall Prairie, and 1 at the elementary level. Along with that, 3 paraprofessional positions. We are in the same boat as Jason Bloomer, where we've had some resignations that we are not filling right now. And I think, I don't know who said the buildings are already feeling it, and Jason's hearing it. The buildings are feeling it, and we're hearing it, being down a couple paraprofessionals. On top of that, we'll be losing our academic assessors. So we have a couple part-time staff who complete testing for us for required evaluations. That allows our intervention specialists and our school psychologists to be more hands-on with students. So that piece won't be there. So ultimately, I think some of the biggest impacts are that caseloads will go up for intervention specialists. We'll be closer to those state maximum levels where they're allowed to be. We've tried to keep them under a little bit to truly provide that best practices model and give some wiggle room. So that'll result in, I think, a lot of impacts in different buildings. At the high school level, we'll likely not be able to offer the same courses as co-taught courses that we have in the past. We'll have fewer sections of courses. Mr. Best mentioned clustering students. We will no longer be able to have that distribution that's very natural for the population of the building across every team, because we're going to have to cluster students on teams so that intervention specialists can provide services. I also think we're going to see an impact on meaningful inclusion. Right now, because our intervention specialists are able to give that very individualized, personalized attention to students, they, above and beyond IEP minutes, spend a lot of time in general education classrooms supporting students, consulting with teachers, modifying assignments, assessment, instruction, and with more students on their caseloads, they're not going to be able to do that. Our school psychologists are involved a lot, as are intervention specialists, in our MTSS processes in the building. So I think everyone here is probably well aware that early intervention is key. There's tons of research behind it. Without having them as accessible to provide intervention for students, we're not going to catch all the students before they get to a point we have to look at whether or not they have a disability and need special education services. So that's a lot. And like I said, I kind of wrapped a lot of things together there, but I think it all goes hand in hand. I know one of our slides talks about some of the non-staff cuts. One piece of it is reducing the number of extended days for our school psychologists. So that goes along with the same concept. Less time for them means less time for students. One thing people often don't realize is in the special ed world, the clock does not stop ticking over breaks. So when our staff are out for the summer and we have a parent call and say, I'm concerned my student has a disability and I'm requesting an evaluation, our school psychs need to be able to come in and work and respond to that request within 30 days, just like we would when school's in session. So those are some of the things, even from a compliance perspective, that we're going to just have to keep a really close eye on, knowing that we have more limited time. And I think the last thing I want to say, sorry, like Brent, I think I've tried to streamline a little looking at the clock, but I've talked a lot with those of you on our board committee for pupil services, our administrators in our district. There's an extremely high turnover rate in special education, and the turnover rate of special educators is like 46% higher than that of general educators. So I think some unintended impacts too that I worry about and will try my best to stay ahead of is trying to make sure that staff are not getting burned out, and what are they giving up to take on some more things, because I also think that having to constantly fill positions and rehire and retrain, not only is it very labor intensive on the administrators and whether it be building principals, me, Justin, our assistant directors, but research also shows that that impacts students and families. It impacts student rapport, it impacts engagement, it impacts outcomes for students, and the relationship with families as well. So I think there's a lot of hidden trickle-down effects that are hard to make tangible. I'm going to give one more example, and then I'll let Justin have the microphone. But I think every building principal talked about the loss of the building leadership team members. And that's something that impacts my department too, because I pull the special ed building leadership team member from every building every other month and work with them and hear about what's going on in the buildings. Are there concerns with parents, concerns with kids? Do we have gaps in our continuum of services? Are we aligned? Are we doing things the same way at Woodland and at Toth and at Frank? So again, that's something that I think with that going away creates a bigger gap in our special ed programming across the district as well.
All right. There's the positions I'm going to talk about now. I think as the district has grown and and is wonderfully diverse, it needs continued to escalate at the building level to a point where this board at one point in time was able to justify the creation of these positions in order to service the needs of these students on the aggregate. And so with that, the 504 coordinator is a good example of that, where Section 504 is a part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which basically guarantees or entitles students to be able to have equal access to, educational programming where federal assistance is provided. So to Dr. Glesser's point, we have been doing some things over the last few years and constructed a lot of streamlined processes to make things more efficient for our buildings, and also to ensure that we are living up to the spirit of the law. So as an example, prior to this position, this responsibility was delegated to different people throughout all 7 buildings, all with different flavors and understandings of what the intention of the law was, and enacting plans for students for lots of different reasons. So prior to the last, I think, 4 years, we were adding 50 to 60 plans. Currently, we're at 173, but we were getting to a point where we had over 225 plans, going up 40% in 1 year. We were a little bit all over the place. So we reined things in, and we were able to help educate our staff, create some guidelines and procedures, and it helped to centralize something like that to take some of the burden off of our building level administrators and counselors. So, that being said, the immediate impact that's felt, it's going to be about 1,400 hours worth of work that is going to trickle down back to the buildings to some level. And so everybody in this room, my colleagues in the back especially, has a full plate. So it's not about what the loss of that 1,400 hours means here at the district office. It's with their full plates, with these legal mandates that we have to meet, what is going to have to come off of their plate that either is an amenity or something that is very value adding that we're just not going to be able to do anymore. So I think time will tell what the exact impact of a position like that being eliminated will be, but I think it's going to have an impact on counselors, administrators, school psychologists, and intervention specialists who we already know we're having a hard time retaining. The Assistant Director of Student Services and Well-Being, in addition to being a very talented and creative person that has some really great strengths that we've been able to build this position around, to really have a keen eye on some very marginalized students. An example I can give you, and this is really tangible, is our homeless students. Believe it or not, we have 25 students who are identified as homeless within Perrysburg. That number is up 75% in 2 years. And I would ask, why do you think that is? It's not because we've seen that kind of increase. It's because we have people paying attention and who have gotten really good at educating our staff on what to look for, screening them through to us, and being able to go through about a 10 to 20 hour process to get the student the resources that they're entitled to, so that way they can worry about learning and not some of the other obstacles and challenges that they have. We have 56 students who are foster placed or court placed. They have rights and entitlements that we need to look into and have someone oversee. Those are complicated cases. Those take a lot of time to look into. So when you're doing the numbers in your head and you think 56 out of 5,800, well, that's not a very big number. But when you don't have someone who is paying attention to it, or it's added on to the plates of other principals and administrators, it's hard to make that a priority, so things slip through the cracks. Our immigrant, migrant, and ELL population have really benefited from a lot more direct oversight, and that's not to slight anybody who has ever in this district looked over those programs, but we've seen an increase in our ELL population, as an example, from I think going back 8 years ago was 36 to now 145. Just this August alone, we went from nearly 100 to 145. That's unprecedented growth.
ELL is?
English language learners, thank you. Yeah. And so, our assistant director has taken the lead to help provide structure, to help advocate for new positions, come up with creative ways to work with the county to bring in additional help at a lesser expense to the district. really to triple the size of our team in the last 3 years. So, attendance intervention. There's a number of mandates around attendance, right? Where we have students who are classified as habitually truant. They need to have attendance intervention teams. There needs to be plans in place. And the person in this position is responsible for compliance in those areas, working with the buildings to even do home visits, work with the courts. Are we going to file truancy charges? What is the next step? Do the child need to go to diversion? Again, these are individual cases that require someone to be involved at some level. So the social worker. So I would add this as well to our assistant director, is that the creation and oversight of the social work department that we've created over the last few years is a major responsibility. And really, we've developed a first-class program. And our individuals have actually been to national conferences and been keynote speakers to talk about how we've developed some of these things. And I'll point out that 14% of our students are now classified as economically disadvantaged. So to put a number on that, that's 812 students. That's like half the high school if we pulled all those kids into there, or maybe not as big as HPI anymore, but maybe a few years ago that would have been the case. So we're not talking about a few kids that live in one particular neighborhood. We're talking 800 children that their families fall below the federal poverty guidelines and have needs that maybe would be going unaddressed otherwise, or at least would not be getting the sort of attention that we're able to provide now. And I brought an example. So this yellow document is something called the No Wrong Door, Help Wherever You Turn. This is put out by Wood County, because I know there's probably people that wonder, well, why don't we turn to the county for some of these resources? And what I can say is, I think we're probably in this position is because we have in the past, and that our needs probably surpass what we're the largest city within Wood County. And maybe in the past, if we had a family that had a need, such as utility assistance, we might hand them this and say, hey, you can call Great Lakes CAP or the Job and Family Services on that number and they'll be able to help you out. Well, our team doesn't do that. Our team actually will call someone that they know there, help the family complete the application, ensure that it's done correctly, and get them what they need. And sometimes even quicker, or know different resources and workarounds. Like, it takes knowledge and expertise to understand how to work through this list instead of just plop it down in front of them and say, here's the help you need, which without those people around, this is what our staff at the buildings, like our counselors, have to resort to, because they don't have the time with 350 to 400 to 450, and in some elementaries, 600 students on their caseload to be able to do that, except in extreme circumstances where their health or safety might be at risk. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the student and family engagement liaison. So when we start looking at some of the data that we get from families and students regarding sense of belonging and connection, and we really pull that apart and look at some of the different underrepresented groups in the district, we've made a lot of inroads, whether it's through our ELL programming, our English language learner programming, or even some of the things that we've done in other pockets of the district. But, student and family engagement liaison is reaching out to new families to do onboarding with them, sending email to check and see how their enrollment process went. Is there anything that they need? And we get requests from, is there another McDonald's that's closer to my house, to, hey, I missed, supply pickup, or we need this, what can you help me? That person becomes a little bit of a concierge. Another example of what is done with that position is mentorship. And so this individual carries about 50 to 60 students on their caseload throughout the district, where no one else in the building is having success reaching these students. And we call this individual in to work with the family, because maybe the family has a conflict with the building because they're frustrated because no one's able to help their child, and serves as a little bit of a mediating force in helping to mend fences and provide not only a trusted adult, but a positive conduit for the family. So I think this is kind of an interesting statistic. I'll share it. So I looked today to see some of our behavioral referrals that have been written throughout the year, and just see how many there are throughout the district. And so far, around 1,500 behavioral referrals have been written for students K through 12. So K through 12, 6,000 kids. So I don't know if that's high or low or anything like that at this point. But that being said, 85% of those are written for boys. 85%. And so I think if you've had boys in your home growing up and you've taught boys, you kind of know, okay. But there's a need there, right? So to kind of satisfy that, the student and family engagement liaison and myself, we work to see, okay, we need a program that works with boys specifically to, work to develop their needs. And so over the course of the last year, 2 years, we've put a program together specifically for boys in grades 5 through 12, where we've taken a couple hundred boys through different small group intervention to address their specific needs. And that's what we do within this department. It's about identifying needs, being creative problem solvers, and being able to figure out how do we deliver on this to help these students that otherwise wouldn't be helped. So without the capacity to do, without the people to execute these things, they just can't be done. And so it's programs like that, we put in place too for equity purposes, because we have some great programs for girls, and we have a little bit of a gap when we don't have similar opportunities for boys, and that can be a little bit problematic. So, the student and family engagement liaison also engages families whose students have attendance issues as well. So it's great to have these tools in the toolbox, and at the same time, some of them aren't mandated, right? And so they're not required. But being a district that is here to ensure every student's greatest potential is met, that's what our charge is, and that's what we try to do with what we had. So I think I'm good, unless there's any questions. Or the next slide, I think we have some other program-related things that we wanted to touch on. So I guess I'll continue for a bit. One of the things on here that I wanted to point out was the elimination of the preferred provider program. That probably doesn't mean a lot to many people. So this was also born out of some frustration with local resources in supporting the mental health needs of our students. And there's plenty of options available. I think some of the relationships that we may have had in the past just weren't working for any different reasons. And within the mental health space, there is incredible turnover. And so we were finding that we were losing school-based counselors in the middle of the year who were carrying caseloads of up to 50 kids. And so we finally just said, we got to try something different. And so we have resource lists that will pass to families who want to seek out help for their children in the mental health space. And, it's long, but it's vetted. And oftentimes what they'll find is there's wait lists. And right now you can't get your child in for several months unless you're lucky and you find a up-and-coming practice that is just looking to accumulate new clients. Well, we went out and vetted and talked to several different area counseling practices and said, we want to partner with you, and we want to take some of our funding, and we want to ensure that our families are able to get the help they need for their children. And so in doing that, we have contracts with these practices that say if we send them a referral, they're going to see the child that's referred within 5 business days. So we've given our families a fast to get their children mental health supports if and when they need it. And another nice thing too is that they know when we call, and we've taken their kids through screenings in the building as needed for certain things, that they're getting reliable information. They know exactly what to expect. There's great dialogue and collaboration, probably the best that I've even experienced in these kind of relationships, not only in my experience here, but also in previous districts. So, that is another thing that's more of I'll call it a luxury, I think, because we have existed in the past where it's like, here's your referral list. We can try to get you in touch with the right person, but you may have to wait. And so what does that impact does that have in a classroom? I mean, if a child isn't right emotionally, their learning is going to suffer, and maybe even the learning of the kids around them as well. So is there anything from here that you wanted to add on? So, okay.
I just want to point out that, there's lots of good information on the internet, but it's about 6 to 8 weeks from call to an appointment.
A wait list, yeah.
And if you know anybody or you've been around anybody who needs that support, 2 days is too much.
Yeah, it's very scary situations.
This is a very serious situation. And going along with what you're saying, Dr. Fultz, when you talk about the mentoring for our students, I mean, how does that affect their academic achievement? I mean, if they weren't getting it, what happens to them academically?
I can tell you that at the high school level, and I'm sure we have some of our high school administrators too that can attest to this, that we're getting kids across the finish line that otherwise probably wouldn't get there. And, you know, yeah, certainly attendance and getting them to come to school. I mean, even with our student services support specialists that we have through the county, himself and the student and family engagement liaison probably have built connections and mentorships with nearly 100 students between the two of them. His room is always full. He's got great rapport with some of the toughest students to work with. And that's exactly why he's there. And again, was it something that we have to do? No. But is it a need? Yes. And so with the resources we had, that was an option that we chose to exercise. So certainly if those children feel that love and belonging, and it's a need being satisfied, well, now we can work with them on what are you thinking about for yourself next? How do we help you achieve, you know, at a level that's going to get you there? How do we connect you with, you know, someone beyond graduation so you have meaningful employment? Like, those conversations take place, but first we have to get them to trust us and find the person that they can trust. So that's the key.
I think Lori and I have had a lot of benefit of being on your committee, and these two particular positions that you're talking about, when I saw them on the list back in October, I said we can't. You just can't. I mean, when you sit there and you don't help the students that need it, the problems that come from that down the road just escalate. Like you said, you know, somebody who needs, I didn't realize the bullet number 2 until I read the slides last night. And since I know someone who needed that desperately, and because we had that program, not only was that marriage saved, but that student was saved insofar as the student did not totally destroy the classroom, because they got in on this and got the help, like Lori said, when they needed it. And whoever came up with that idea, I thought was just beyond being a trailblazer. I had to use it at least once tonight, right? But these are 3 things that with what y'all have done, God bless you, because I know this was tortuous to do, this whole presentation and everything. But if there is any way to salvage those 2 people in that program for the students who so desperately need it, because we've seen the results of that. We've seen how desperate, you know, so many people out in the community think that, like Ray Pullman used to say, it's not the chalk and chalkboard classroom anymore. Our students aren't like what we were in school. The pressures, everything that they go through, and I blame social media. And since my son's not here, I blame video games too. I cannot see a Perrysburg school district out without those 3. Everything else, I can sit there and cry tears over and kick cans and bang walls, but those 3, I think, are just, it's neglect, it's student neglect. I don't know how else to put it.
I think, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, I think the only way I could try to put logic behind it is I think if you roll back to the last time we had operating funds at this level and you look at the positions that were existed, none of these did, right? And so I think the harder thing to understand is that all this was attempted to being done by one individual prior to that. And so there were things not being done, obviously, to this level, but that's the commitment that was being made. And I think a lot of these positions were created with, you know, grant funding that was one time that we, you know, due to that, have had to make the hard decision that it was just not sustainable with where we're at now financially. And so looking back, Were we functioning without them before? Of course. Are we better off with them? Yes. But under the circumstances, this is just what felt like it had to be
I
done.
understand that, but don't we also have a lot more students now?
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say that. We've had, 330 plus since the 2021, and students have changed, people have changed over the course of the last 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
And while we may not have needed it, and we have used it with grant funds, it's needed.
I would say that you
Absolutely.
probably needed it
But we weren't
then,
able to do it.
but now we've shined a really bright light on how much.
And going back to the pupil services too, and I'm going to try to do this without getting emotional. I'm very open about our story of Lucas from ages 3 to now, and I truly believe that if it wasn't the school district, he wouldn't be where he is today. And yes, you do go above and beyond. And it's very upsetting that people don't understand that. And what we do as a school district for our students is more, and it's what's needed. And I appreciate what the district has done for our students, not just mine. And so this is gut-wrenching.
Yeah, the fact that, when you brought up the homeless students, that was surprising in and of itself, but then when you said why, just because we've had the people there to have
To look.
close eyes on it. You can't do that when you're trying to put 30 hours worth of work into an 8-hour day. You can't do that.
Correct.
Yeah, Perrysburg is an excellent district for several reasons, for a whole bunch of reasons. And during my time as a board member, right, it's human nature. You don't hear about all of that on the street. You don't get those emails saying that. You look at the data, you look at the results, you look at the state report card, you see the graduation rates, all those things, and you say, yes, that's where, as a board member, the district's doing great work, amongst other things. But I tell you, the one area where I do get compliments consistently during my 8 years on this board has been on the work that this group has done right here. The work that Pupil Services has done. Those are the emails, those are when I'm having conversations with parents say, that work is exceptional. And we're going to be shifting. We're going to be shifting from excellence to compliance. And it's going to look a lot different now.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And one piece that has crossed my mind as we've been working through a lot of this is because we've had really great intervention programs for behavior and mental health, we're talking about impacts on students. We are very likely to see a rise in special education numbers because of that. When students aren't getting the intervention they need, they're not going to close gaps. It's going to impact outcomes. And I think we're going to end up seeing more students identified with disabilities as opposed to getting intervention and closing gaps. Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that when we really talk about how different things impact students, we have to look at the long-term impacts as well.
One of the things Andrea and I have really worked hard on the last couple of years is how do we retain our intervention specialists? Because the level of burnout for intervention specialists she said it, is much, much higher than any other teacher out there. And when I am out recruiting and bringing people in to interview, we would talk about those things that we were doing to support our intervention specialists. I am really worried moving forward of what's going to happen with our current intervention specialists, and then the shortage of educators out there that are going into being an intervention specialist is very, very small. And talking to other HR directors around the state of Ohio, the hardest positions to fill are intervention specialists. And so that's a huge concern coming from our office. And I always felt when I was interviewing, because I interview pretty much almost everybody teacher who kind of walks through the door at times, have that touch, that first touch with many of them. And it's such an easy sell when you are talking about Perrysburg. And that's going to change for us in there. It's like you're recruiting somebody to go play for Ohio State. That was easy. They just need to win a little bit more. So, on that.
And talking about the turnover, we experienced that. We experienced that in the high school. In the 3 years Lucas is there, I think he had 3 teachers. And students, it takes it takes a while for them to get back into the routine and for people to understand them and students, and it does it for general ed too, but especially students with an intervention specialist, that relationship and understanding the kid, and this is just so, like I said many times, gut-wrenching.
Yeah, the last thing I'd like to say is that I appreciate you guys sharing some of the questions that you get from people. And, once some of these cuts were announced, we're not immune from receiving those questions too. And I think the one I have the hardest time with is, people asking, I thought we were supposed to be about all students. And the best explanation I can give is what I did earlier, but I think, there is a doubt now that are we really attempting to be, does all really mean all anymore? And I guess the challenge from this point on is to prove that, yes, we are, just in a little different way.
Thank you. Yep. So a couple other things, and we'll move quickly. Some other reductions that we're contemplating is reducing the number of student days by 4. So each day is approximately $44,000. So by eliminating a day per quarter, that could result in some savings. We're also eliminating the tiered substitute pay system. We've heard Don talk about that our sub-fill list has increased, and we've had kind of a tier system for subs as an incentive. And so that's something that, again, something that we do. We had the funds to do it. It benefited the classroom in a lot of ways, and not available. And we know we're hoping that there's some more retirements, but going back to the 4 instructional days, the schools in Ohio used to have a number of school days. It's switched to hours. It's tiered by the grade level bands. So here is the number of days. So we converted the hours into days. The number of school days that we are over the state minimum. So for 10th to 12th grade, we're currently over 19.8 days we go longer than that minimum. And you can see across the board that we're well over half-day kindergarten, which we have just a small number of students that are in half-day. We're only over 8.65 days. So if we have two fog delay days and we cancel school 4 times, they would be having to make up hours. So that's the significance of that. So with the less than 4 days of instruction, you can see that is, we're still well over, with the exception of the half day, which we'd be below 5 days. We also factored in with the shortened day at HPI. You can see the difference in terms of what that time means overall, but that difference takes us from 28 extra days with no change to schedule to 13.63. So that's something we're doing. We've increasing that was something on the original blueprint back in October, where we're doubling the participation fees for those activities. You heard that the person who is kind of in charge of the Stinger Pass program her position is being cut. So how do we continue to offer that when the person who does that is not there? Stinger Passes is a nice benefit. We also know that this past fall, Stinger Passes were used 797 times just this fall alone. And that's gate revenue that's not being collected. So I think that's something that we can continue to talk through as we look at different kinds of alternatives. So I think for us, that leads us to the kind of the future levy discussions. And we talked about what happened, but we have a levy that is set to expire at the end of next year. That's a permanent improvement levy. So as we begin to talk about 2025, There is a levy on the books since 1980. Every 5 years, it's been replaced or renewed. It brings in approximately $1.5 million. It can only be applied towards things that are permanent. So think roofs, purchasing buses, fixing and repairing, those kinds of things. So the board will have to decide, do we let that expire? Again, with our aging buildings, 1.5 million doesn't go very far, but we're certainly thankful that we have it. So you know, do we renew that? And then when do the board wants that to go on the ballot? So it's May or November are the two windows for elections that the board can choose. So that's something that we need to think about as we get into discussion about levies. We also, in fiscal year 25, we're retiring the debt mills. So we did talk about this during the operational levy because with the operational levy, the first year, we weren't going to raise taxes on the 8-year levy. The second year, when it would go into effect, we were retiring these debt mills from the high school, and it was actually greater than what the projected first year or second year collection would have been. But anyway, that is coming off the books as well. We've had some conversations. There's been a Top Golf kind of company that's interested in coming to Perrysburg. And we've had some people say, well, Top Golf is coming. Your $13.5 million problem is going to go away. So we wanted to just highlight, and Randy did a great job of pulling some stuff together, but in Columbus, there is an actual Top Golf. These are right from the counties, Franklin County, or not Franklin County, I think it's in Delaware actually.
County.
Yeah.
Polaris.
Pulled their taxes, and the property value is $9.9 million. All the taxes they pay for a year, which includes schools and also all the other taxes, is $264,000 per year. So in Perrysburg, Randy did the exercise. Randy, I don't know if you want to just walk me through
so
that.
the question is, you get a Top Golf here, or something similar valuation, similar total taxes, but here's the thing. What new revenue for us would be what's there. That's new revenue. They could still pay $260,000 or $300,000 in taxes, but that's not new revenue. We'll get, you know, what you see there, about $70,000 in new revenue. Now the rest of that would go to reducing the effective millage for everyone else.
And that's the House Bill 920.
So
So,
in
we
fact,
can't
it's not-
collect any additional money.
So it's actually on my to-do list when you get through some of this other stuff at a board meeting to walk you through how this works. I can do it levy by levy to show you that the only reason we would get more additional money because we're at the 20 mil floor. If we weren't at the 20 mil floor, we would get the $15,000 in inside millage and a little bit on the PI, and that's it.
Yeah.
So
So let me be clear. We're grateful that there is commercial development coming in. We're grateful that this is not $9 million worth of new homes or apartments.
Yeah.
So we're grateful that that is coming. And our point, and so 75,000 is 75,000. That's great. But the idea, the concept that this one development is going to solve all the school's problem, that's the exercise here. So we're grateful it's coming. We're grateful that, I understand. Outside of where it's located, we're always happy that somewhere in the district there's commercial property being added.
Yeah, and
There you go.
the
I
key
like
is
that.
the key is the commercial property reduce the burden on the residential homeowner. That's really the strength of commercial development. Obviously, you get some additional revenue, but for us, where we are, it's Rossford's situation is because they're 50% commercial.
Yes, this gives you the perspective of how much commercial development is necessary to make up $13.5
We
million.
need 193 Top Golfs
math
to come to
quicker than I
Perrysburg.
Way to go, Susan.
Yeah, because you got to realize we're almost 1.4 billion in taxable valuation. Topgolf's 3.5 million, right? in taxable valuation. So it's just to Susan's numbers, we want it, we need commercial development, but on its own, it's not gonna solve the problem.
Today,
Not in a residential neighborhood.
you know, today, the 5-year forecast, just kind of going back, you know, Randy calculated the $14 million. That would be basically replacing the $13.5 million that went away. The $6 million would stay in place. So for those that are saying, well, the district, you know, the board, why didn't you just ask for the 13.5 million and capture that? To do that, we would have had to have made the $6 million worth of cuts.
Still be doing this meeting right here.
Right, and then going to the voters and asking for that. So the board spent months talking about that. So I wanted just to highlight that. As the board considers future elections and what to do, you know, it's just the electorate, the mood across the state is challenging right now with levies. And again, we highlighted some of those. In Perrysburg, here locally, you know, from 2008 to 2020 was the longest stretch in Perrysburg history. You know, since going back to the 20s or 30s, that we've had success